Chapter 16:31. To think that you are so weak. May I ask if you are really a heaven-ranked quasi-emperor? Yi Fei was stunned. After all, what he released earlier was merely a king-grade Taiji domain. In the end, he managed to make the fourth elder, a heaven-ranked quasi-emperor, vomit blood with one move. If Yi Fei had not sensed that the fourth elder's qi and blood had been damaged by the Taiji sword qi, he would have suspected that this person was faking it. Similarly, this scene startled all the surrounding cultivators. They had clearly sensed that the fourth elder had released the aura of a heaven-rank quasi-emperor. However, in the end, it was Yi Fei who defeated the fourth elder with one move of his sword qi. The most shocking thing was that the domain contained in Yi Fei's sword qi was still very strong. It was clearly just a king-grade domain. Not to mention Yi Fei being stunned. Many people were stupefied as well. What's going on? A heaven-ranked domain actually could not defeat a king-grade domain? What do you know? The Heavy Cauldron Sect's quasi-emperors are the same as the Core Pill Sect's quasi-emperors. Their domains are used to support alchemy and blacksmithing. They are not used for combat. However, even if it is a supporting heaven-ranked domain, the other party would need to be a quasi-emperor in order to win with one move. Immediately, many cultivators looked at Yi Fei with reverence, especially the Starry Sky martial monarch who had insulted the terrestrial cultivators earlier. That Starry Sky martial monarch crawled up from the ground, his face covered in blood. Just as he was about to charge at Yi Fei in a rage, Yi Fei suddenly saw Yi Fei's heaven-rank quasi-emperor. Suddenly, he saw Yi Fei forcing the fourth elder, a heaven-grade quasi-emperor, back with a single sword strike. He was so scared that he did not even dare to let out a fart. He slipped into the crowd and did not dare to show his face again. The injured fourth elder became even more enraged. The instant he stabilized his injuries, he roared at Ma Tai. Ma Tai, you actually tricked me. Didn't you say that he only has a strong physical body? Why didn't you tell this elder that he is actually a quasi-emperor as well? Furthermore, he is a king-grade quasi-emperor. The instant they saw Yi Fei release his domain, everyone determined that Yi Fei was a quasi-emperor. Yi Fei was speechless at this. A single king-stage domain was enough to scare these people to this extent. If he were to release 3 heaven-stage domains, wouldn't these people be scared to death? However, Yi Fei didn't do that. Instead, he thought to himself, people fear fame just as pigs fear fattening. I don't know why the Boundless sect seems to have set their sights on me. If I don't release my heaven-grade domain, I can still disguise myself. If I release my heaven-grade domain, someone will definitely notice. I'm connected to Yi Fei. That's right, I am a quasi-emperor king. You're just an insignificant blacksmith, yet you dare to go against this seat? This seat thinks that you do not know how to spell the word death. If you know what's good for you, scram immediately. This seat disdains to lower himself to the level of an ant like you. Yi Fei placed his hands behind his back and assumed a proud posture. Yi Fei was truly as arrogant as he could be. However, if Yi Fei were to be arrogant in front of ordinary quasi-emperors or martial emperors, it would be fine. However, the most important thing was that Yi Fei was going to face a heaven-level quasi-emperor. Yet, Yi Fei was still so arrogant and egotistical, even treating his opponent like an ant. No matter how one looked at it, it was very strange. If it were any other heavenly emperor, when they heard this, they would have rushed over to slap Yi Fei to death to vent their anger. Unfortunately, the fourth elder was a heavenly emperor and possessed a support-type domain. He could bully mundane-rank quasi-emperors when he was bored. However, if he met a strong king-rank quasi-emperor, the fourth elder would immediately be defeated. They were no match for him. Good, good, you have guts. No one has ever dared to oppose our Heavy Cauldron sect in Pill Cauldron City. Everyone, listen up. If anyone can make a move and help this old man kill this brat, this old man will gift him a quasi-god tool on the spot. A sinister cold smile appeared on the fourth elder's face. Ma Tai glared at Yi Fei with even more venomous hatred. He said coldly, "This time, this young master admits that I made an error in judgment. Unexpectedly, you are actually a king-rank quasi-emperor. However, so what? Although our heavy cauldron sect's combat prowess is not strong, we are good at refining. As long as we casually take out a quasi-god tool, we will have combat prowess. Strong quasi-emperors will work for us. Don't you all think so? Matai's expression turned ferocious as he quickly swept his gaze over the few quasi-emperors in the crowd. These people were all here to ask for desolate beast pills from the core pill sect. However, this did not mean that they were uninterested in a quasi-god tool. When they heard that they could obtain a quasi-god tool if they killed Yi Fei, many of them hesitated. Only an old quasi-emperor hesitated. Aside from them, the other 10-odd quasi-emperors all walked out of the crowd and surrounded Yi Fei. Yi Fei's expression could not help turning somewhat unsightly. He had not expected Matai to have such a sinister method. Could it be that you want to force me to use my heavenly domain or the black sword? Yi Fei was a bit hesitant. If he did that, then his identity would be easily guessed. The Boundless sect would immediately know his exact location. Wait, just as Yi Fei hesitated, a large group of core pill sect disciples suddenly entered the inn. The leader was actually a woman. Her face was bright like the moon, but she had a delicate beauty that could not stand up to the wind. One could not help wanting to hug her and dote on her. Unfortunately, no one present dared to do so. Even if they thought about it, they did not dare to profane it. This was because the person who appeared was none other than one of the core pill sect's two vice sect masters, Dan Linger. Yi Fei was somewhat shocked as well. He said softly, "Another heaven Dao quasi-emperor? I wonder, how does she compare to this useless fourth elder?" Yi Fei's voice was not loud. However, everyone present was either a martial monarch or a quasi-emperor. Everyone heard his words clearly. A bona fide heaven Dao quasi-emperor being suppressed by a king quasi-emperor was already very cowardly. Now, Yi Fei was mocking him like this. An incomparably furious expression immediately appeared on the fourth elder's face. "Evil creature, you are seeking death. What are you waiting for? Kill him. Kill him ruthlessly. Don't kill him yet. Break his limbs first and cripple his essence spirit. This young master not only wants to eat him, but also his dragon tortoise." At this moment, Matai's expression turned even more sinister. His 10,000 beast heavenly devouring technique required him to consume all sorts of vicious beasts before he could completely cultivate it. Be it Yi Fei or the dragon tortoise, he did not want to let them off. Hearing this, Yi Fei could not help feeling intense rage and murderous intent in his heart. However, before he could make a move, a huge heavenly emperors might already encase them. Anger flashed in Dan Linger's almond-shaped eyes. She said sullenly, "I told you to stop. Did you not hear me? Don't forget, this is my core pill sect's territory. Whoever makes a move here will be my core pill sect's enemy. In the future, you can forget about obtaining a desolate beast pill." Dan Linger's words caused the expressions of the restless quasi-emperors to change. After all, they were here to obtain a desolate beast pill to raise their domains. Chapter 1632. Dan Ling, you have to think carefully. Are you really going to go against our heavy cauldron sect for an outsider? The fourth elder's words clearly contained a trace of threat. Matai's face was filled with rage. He had nearly been killed by Yi Fei's punch at the city gates. That was a great humiliation. If he did not kill Yi Fei, what face would he have left in Danding City? Most importantly, be it Yi Fei's flesh or the dragon tortoise's flesh, they were both of great benefit to the 10,000 beast devouring heavenly art. Matai had to obtain them. Seeing Dan Ling, stop him, Matai immediately tried to curry favor. "Little sister Ling, we grew up together. Let me give you some face and let our heavy cauldron sect handle this matter." "Give you face and let you handle it? Matai, you have fallen to the evil path. Not only did your temperament change, but your brain also turned stupid. You brought people and barged into my primary pill sects injuring the elders of my sect and threatening the guests of my inn. If I let you succeed, what prestige will my primary pill sect have left? Who is the one who is not giving face to whom in Danding City?" Dan Ling, said with a baleful expression. When Yi Fei heard this and saw her aura, he knew that Dan Ling, was definitely a competitive woman. He immediately relaxed significantly. He knew that even if he did not make a move, for the sake of the primary pill's sex reputation, Dan Ling would absolutely not allow Ma Tai to mess around here. However, this is good as well. Just relying on my King Gray domain is definitely not enough to deal with more than 10 quasi-emperors at the same time. I will definitely have to expose 1 or 2 strong martial techniques. Now that the Boundless Sect is targeting me, it would be best if I could not expose them. Seeing that Dan Ling had already taken control of the situation, Yi Fei did not say anything else. He also wanted to see how Dan Ling would handle this matter. Ma Tai and the Fourth Elder had not expected Dan Ling to not even give them this much face. Their expressions could not help but turn even more unsightly. Deputy Sect Leader Dan, you'd better think carefully. It's not a wise choice to affect the relationship between our two sects for an unrelated continental martial artist. The Fourth Elder's face was gloomy, as if he was hinting at something. Dan Ling, Er's expression immediately changed. Her seemingly delicate body suddenly erupted with a powerful aura. You're threatening me. Very well, I originally wanted to kick you out, but now I've changed my mind. From now on, he's a guest to the Pill Origin School. If you provoke him, he'll be our guest. That means offending my core sect. Boom! Dan Ling. Er's words caused an uproar among the surrounding cultivators. Even the 10-odd quasi-emperors who had withdrawn looked at Yi Fei with some envy and jealousy. Yi Fei was very surprised. Finally, he couldn't help but say, "Wait a minute, guest elder? Miss, I don't think you asked for my opinion. Why are you suddenly making me a guest elder?" Dan Ling was still angry at the Fourth Elder's threat. Hence, she impulsively said that she wanted Yi Fei to be a guest elder. This made many people envious. In the end, Yi Fei still appeared very unwilling. This angered Dan Ling even more. A guest elder of my core sect can receive a mortal desolate pill every half a year. If you make a special contribution, you can also receive earth desolate pills and heavenly desolate pills as a reward. More importantly, a guest elder does not need to join my core sect. He is free to come and go. If you do not accept, then forget it. Dan Ling was very angry. If Dan Ling were not angry, she would look down on a king-level quasi-emperor. After hearing about the benefits of being a guest elder, Yi Fei perked up. Now, he understood why so many quasi-emperors were willing to line up here. After all this time, the benefits of the core sect were so good. Not only were there earth desolate pills and heavenly desolate pills to raise one's domain, but more importantly, a guest elder could come and go as he pleased. If he was unhappy, he could stay. If he was unhappy, he could leave at any time. With such a good thing, even quasi-emperors would do everything they could to enter the core sect, so they could get a guest elder position. Similarly, there were benefits and no responsibilities. Yi Fei also felt that he had no reason to reject such a good position. He immediately shouted, "I accept. Since the Vice Sect Master thinks highly of me, naturally, I am willing to serve the Vice Sect Master." No, anyone can become your guest elder, but not him. Ma Tai and the Fourth Elder immediately felt anxious. If Yi Fei became a guest elder, how are they going to take revenge on Yi Fei? Shut up. This is the end of my core sect. It is one thing for you two dogs to ignore my core sect and barge in to cause trouble, but you even dare to be disrespectful to the Vice Sect Master. As a guest elder, I will teach you a lesson on behalf of the Vice Sect Master today, helping him vent his anger. Yi Fei had his reasons for agreeing to be a guest elder so readily. Not to mention the generous benefits of being a guest elder. Just the status of a guest elder would allow him to use it to teach Ma Tai and the Fourth Elder a proper lesson. He did not need to worry about the core sect objecting or obstructing him. Dan Ling did not stop Yi Fei from continuing to attack Ma Tai. However, she was somewhat speechless at how Yi Fei instantly accepted the status of a guest elder. Seeing that Yi Fei was about to charge over again, Dan Ling actually did not say anything to stop him. Ma Tai and the Fourth Elder immediately paled. They had both suffered at Yi Fei's hands before. This was especially so for the fourth elder. He was a bona fide heaven-grade quasi-emperor. To think that he could not even raise his head before a king-grade quasi-emperor like Yi Fei. If Yi Fei beat him up again, he would feel even more vexed. Damn Ling you win. You will definitely suffer a crushing defeat in the pill cauldron battle. Let's go. Whoosh. The fourth elder grabbed Ma Tai and quickly turned into a beam of light, rushing out of the inn. Don't think about leaving. Yi Fei snorted coldly. He did not intend to let these two off. Since they provoked him, they had to pay the price. Furthermore, this Ma Tai did not just provoke him. Instead, he wanted to eat him and the dragon tortoise to cultivate an evil cultivation technique. Yi Fei could not tolerate this. Stop. Dan Ling, Er's figure suddenly blocked Yi Fei. Then, she shook her head somewhat unwillingly and said, I don't care what grudges you have. However, the continent has its rules, and the starry heavens have its rules as well. The Pill Cauldron battle has not started yet. As a guest elder of my primal core sect, you cannot get into too much of conflict with Ma Tai. All right, on account of the vice sect master, I will let them off this time. Considering that he still needed to obtain the Earth Desolate Pill and Heaven Desolate Pill from Dan Ling, Yi Fei decided to let Ma Tai off for now. Then, he politely performed a cupped fist salute to Dan Ling and said, Many thanks to Vice Sect Master for helping me out. Vice Sect Master, may I know when I can obtain the Earth Desolate Pill and Mortal Desolate Pill that I need to become a guest elder? Yi Fei's heart was filled with eagerness. After all, the Desolate Beast Pill was a special pill that could raise one's domain. If he could obtain 2 Desolate Beast Pills, his Azure Dragon domain and Tai Chi domain could immediately transform in a Heaven domain. In that case, he would have 5 Heaven domains at the same time. Just thinking about it made him very excited. Chapter 1633. To cultivators, the most important things were martial techniques and cultivation techniques, followed by weapons and medicinal pills. This also determined that alchemists and blacksmiths were highly sought after by cultivators. The primary pill school and the heavy cauldron school were representatives of this. As alchemists and blacksmith sects, their combat prowess was not particularly strong. However, they could use medicinal pills and weapons to recruit a large number of cultivators with strong combat prowess to work for them. These cultivators were guests. Furthermore, only Earth-grade quasi-emperors with strong combat prowess were qualified to be invited to become a guest. 4 king-grade quasi-emperors to become a guest. They either had shocking potential or had special talents. It was unprecedented for someone like Yi Fei to become a guest due to Dan Ling, Er's conflict with the Heavy Cauldron School. Immediately, many people looked at Yi Fei with bewilderment. Dan Ling also looked at Yi Fei with a headache. She said helplessly, You can stay in the primary pill school. However, you have to make a corresponding contribution to obtain the Human Desolate Pill and Earth Desolate Pill. This is the rule. Uncle Dan, you are responsible for telling him the rules. Oh, right, what is your name? I am Dong Fong Yu. Yi Fei said without blushing. Dong Fong Yu? I will remember you. Do your best. Dan Ling nodded simply. Then, she turned and left in a hurry. As the deputy sect master of the primary pill school, she was very busy. If not for Ma Tai causing such a huge commotion, she would not have been alarmed. Little Yu, don't think too much. This is how the deputy sect master is. He does not have any complaints about you. Uncle Dan watched Dan Ling leave before coming over to talk to Yi Fei. Yi Fei nodded. He more or less understood that he was able to become a guest this time due to luck. He understood Dan Ling depression. Uncle Dan, don't worry. I understand. Those who can become the deputy sect master are all busy. I will not mind. However, the Human Desolate Pill and Earth Desolate Pill, they cannot be lacking. Yi Fei reminded him, not forgetting to forget. Uncle Dan's face was immediately filled with awkwardness. He was speechless as he bitterly smiled. Young man, although you became a guest elder for the Desolate Beast Pills, you haven't made any contributions. Isn't this a little too direct? Remember, our core elixir faction does not keep idle people. Even if it is a guest, we must still do so. You have to display enough value to be rewarded with the Earth Desolation Pill. That's not right. Didn't the Vice Sect Master say that after becoming a guest elder, you'll get a human desolate pill every half a year and an Earth Desolate Pill every year? Yi Fei was a little dissatisfied. Hearing this, Uncle Dan was so angry that he almost beat him up. He couldn't help but teach him a lesson. Brat, you have to work for our Dan Yuan school for at least half a year. How can you just reach out and ask for it? Do you really think that our Dan Yuan school doesn't need money? Come with me. I will arrange a place for you to stay. At the same time, I will explain the rules of our Dan Yuan school to you. After you are familiar with everything, you can slowly accumulate contributions. After half a year, you'll get a human desolate pill. Only when your contributions are great enough, you will get an Earth Desolate Pill. It actually takes so long. Is there no way to get the Heaven Desolate Pill quickly? Yi Fei was very unhappy. He could become a guest elder, but it was not worth it to stay in Danding City for half a year. He came to the ancient Road of Stars to gain experience. Not to mention half a year, even 3 months' time would be enough for him to be overtaken by D-Fan and the others. What? You're actually thinking about the Heaven Desolate Pill? Sigh, I really don't know what to say about you. Uncle Dan originally thought that Yi Fei was quite honest. However, the moment he opened his mouth, he was biting off more than he could chew. After asking about the Earth Desolate Pill, he actually wanted the Heaven Desolate Pill. This immediately caused Uncle Dan's impression of Yi Fei to take a turn for the worse. He believed that Yi Fei was one of those arrogant people of a younger generation who was biting off more than he could chew. Uncle Dan gave a cold harumph and said nothing more. He just led the way. Yi Fei could not help but reveal a bitter smile. This Uncle Dan most likely misunderstood me. Xiao Chun did not think that there was anything wrong with asking about the Heaven Desolate Pill. After all, different cultivation realms required different treasures. If Xiao Chun was an ordinary quasi-emperor, an Earth Desolate Pill would be an extravagant hope for him. However, he was not an ordinary quasi-emperor, but the strongest heaven-grade quasi-emperor. At such a height, an Earth Desolate Pill was no longer enough to pique Yi Fei's interest. Only the Heaven Desolate Pill could move him. However, Xiao Chun could not tell Uncle Dan the secret. Once he did, his true identity would be exposed. It looks like I can only ask about the Heaven Desolate Pill later. Yi Fei shook his head. He did not mind Uncle Dan's cold attitude. Instead, he continued to ask respectfully, Uncle Dan, I have some treasures on me that I would like to sell to the primary pill faction. Would you please wait for a while I sell my treasures first before going to the guest residence? You still have treasures? Uncle Dan was somewhat surprised. However, even though Yi Fei was a piece of rotten wood who bit off more than he could chew, at least he was respectful to an old senior. Only then did Uncle Dan's expression soften significantly. He said indifferently, This old man is the primary pill faction's external affairs elder. Not only am I in charge of managing the guest elders, but I'm also in charge of buying and selling treasures. As for the treasures you sell to me, you can exchange them for contribution points. When you have enough contribution points, the guest elders can exchange them for any medicinal pill of my primary pill faction. Yi Fei's eyes lit up. He quickly asked, Uncle Dan, how many contribution points can the tyrannical dragon saliva be exchanged for? How many spirit stones can it be exchanged for? You actually have the tyrannical dragon saliva? That's good stuff. 1 caddy of ordinary dragon saliva can be exchanged for 1 million contribution points, which is 1 million upper grade spirit stones. Essence dragon saliva is worth 10 times more. How much dragon saliva do you have? Uncle Dan's eyelids twitched. He did not expect Yi Fei to have dragon saliva. What? Essence dragon saliva? 1 caddy is worth 10 million spirit stones. Those damn tyrannical dragons. If I had known that dragon saliva was so valuable, I would have made them spit out tens of thousands of caddies. That way, Xiao Chao and the dragon turtle would not have to worry about not having enough spirit stones to eat in the future. While he was secretly regretting his decision, Yi Fei had already calculated and said, I don't have much dragon saliva on me, but all of it is essence dragon saliva. There should be about 500 caddies. After all, there were hundreds of tyrannical dragons. Even if each of them spat out a mouthful of dragon saliva, it would still weigh about 2 to 3 caddies. The tyrannical dragon king spat out a mouthful and filled the dragon turtle's black wok. As he spoke, Yifei took out several large jars of dragon saliva from his space belt. Uncle Dan was dumbfounded when he saw this. He was afraid that his old eyes would blur, so he rubbed his eyes hard and widened them again. He was right. There were 3 large jars of dragon saliva, and all of it was essence dragon saliva. The total weight was exactly 500 caddies. Uncle Dan's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Just a moment ago, he felt that Yifei was biting off more than he could chew. Now, the way Uncle Dan looked at Yifei had become much more mysterious. Chapter 1634. Exchanged. Not only was Uncle Dan's eyelids twitching, but even the muscles on his face were twitching violently. With his experience, he naturally knew that Yifei wasn't telling the truth. One must know that the Essence Core sect had been coveting the Tyrannosaurus dragon saliva for many years. During this period, they had sent people to try to communicate with the Tyrannosaurus king. In the end, each person who went was trampled to death. As time passed, no one in this area dared to provoke the Tyrannosaurus king. Uncle Dan had lived for most of his life, but this was the first time he had seen someone like Yifei, who could not only exchange a large amount of dragon saliva with the Tyrannosaurus king, but also escape unscathed. For a moment, Uncle Dan didn't know what to say. He could only stare blankly at the several large jars of dragon saliva, so shocked that he was speechless for a long time. Yifei immediately became nervous. Could it be that the Tyrannosaurus king tricked me and that this isn't the essence of dragon saliva? If that was the case, he would have to go back and settle the score with the Tyrannosaurus king. In the beast-marked space, the dragon turtle's face was even darker. In front of it was a black pot filled with a few dozen kilograms of dragon saliva that the Tyrannosaurus king had spat out for it. No, no, no. Little you know, young Master Dongfang, you've misunderstood. This is the real essence of dragon saliva. This time, you made a great contribution to our Essence Core sect. Just this 1,000 kilograms of dragon saliva alone can be exchanged for at least 10 Earth Desolation pills. Uncle Dan quickly changed his words. His face was burning hot. Only now did he realize that he had misjudged Yifei. This young Master Dongfang in front of him wasn't biting off more than he could chew. He was clearly a hidden super expert. Uncle Dan's attitude naturally became a lot warmer. The Essence Core sect didn't care about ordinary king-level quasi-emperors. However, for someone like Yifei, who had great potential and could communicate well with existences like the Tyrannosaurus king, this was a target that the Essence Core sect had to try their best to rope in. Without another word, Uncle Dan brought Yifei to the guest's residence at the fastest speed. Then, he hurriedly said, "Young Master Dongfang, please wait a moment. I will help you exchange for 10 Earth Desolation pills. Thank you for your trouble. However, forget about the Earth Desolation elixir. What I need is the Heaven Desolation elixir. I hope that I can exchange all of this dragon saliva for spiritual stones. It would be even better if there are spiritual veins," Yifei said with a smile. With his current realm, the Earth Desolation elixir was not very attractive to him. Uncle Dan's eyelids twitched again. However, this time, he didn't dare to look down on any of Yifei's requests. Instead, he looked deeply at Yifei and said, "Please wait for a moment. I will immediately ask the 2 vice sect leaders about this matter. As for the spirit stones, we will exchange them for you. As for the spiritual veins, Uncle Dan didn't mention them." Yifei didn't ask either. After all, this wasn't the ancient era. Spiritual veins weren't just precious on land. They were also extremely precious in space. For example, Xiao Chao could sense the aura of more than 100 spiritual veins in the primary elixir sect. Unfortunately, he couldn't touch these spiritual veins. This made Yifei very depressed. "I really don't know when I'll be able to gather 1,000 spiritual veins." Yifei sighed as he walked into the guest's residence. This was a small courtyard with 3 entrances and 1 exit. It couldn't be compared to the palaces in the depths of the primary elixir sect, but Yi Fei was already very satisfied. After all, he was only a guest of the primary elixir sect. He could stay and leave as he pleased. Of course, he couldn't expect the primary elixir sect to treat him with anything too good. However, Yi Fei was very satisfied with the efficiency of the primary elixir sect. Less than 15 minutes after Uncle Dan left, disciples of the primary elixir sect carried a large number of boxes of spiritual stones and walked into his courtyard in a line. Soon, his courtyard was filled with boxes of spirit stones. There were hundreds of billions of them. These spirit stones not only filled up Yi Fei's space belt, but also filled up Xiao Qiao and the dragon turtle space belt. Inside the beastmark space, Xiao Qiao and the dragon turtle once again felt crowded. In the end, Xiao Qiao and the dragon turtle had no choice but to squat on Xiao Qiao's immortal crystal bed. The other places had been completely submerged by the spiritual stones. They couldn't even squeeze out of space to turn over. However, at this moment, Xiao Qiao and the dragon turtle were full of happiness. When a large number of spiritual stones poured in, the dragon turtle secretly opened its mouth again. Xiao Qiao soon discovered the dragon turtle's actions. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Xiao Qiao was puzzled. Didn't the dragon turtle say that it was going to start exercising to lose weight? Roar, roar. The dragon turtle was busy opening its mouth and didn't have time to explain. It raised a small wooden sign and wrote, "Finish this meal first. I'll start exercising after I'm full." Xiao Qiao naively believed the dragon tortoise's words and allowed the dragon tortoise to crazily devour her. Very soon, the originally crowded space in the beastmark space was emptied out by the dragon tortoise. At the same time, Uncle Dan also reported Yi Fei's matter to Dan Ling at the fastest speed. When she heard that Yi Fei not only obtained a large amount of dragon saliva, but also could talk to the Tyrannosaurus King, even as the deputy sect leader, Dan Ling was shocked. It's my fault this time. Although Dongfang Yu's potential isn't as good as those geniuses on the Starry Sky rankings, it's not too far off. No wonder he dared to offend the Heavy Cauldron sect. I originally thought that he was ignorant and fearless. Now it seems that he's bold because he's skilled. He didn't take Ma Tai seriously at all. A bitter smile appeared on Dan Ling's face, as well as some regret. If she had known that Yi Fei had such potential, no matter how busy she was, she would have stopped and tried to rope in Yi Fei. Fortunately, she still had a chance to make up for her mistake. Dan Ling thought for a while and asked Uncle Dan, "Uncle Dan, earlier you said that Dongfang Yu wasn't interested in the Earth Desolate pill and even asked for the Heaven Desolate pill? That's strange. He is only a king-level quasi-emperor. What is most useful to him right now is the Earth Desolate pill. What does he need the Heaven Desolate pill for?" "Second young miss, this old man has something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." "Speak." Dan Ling raised her hand domineeringly, indicating for Uncle Dan to continue. Not only did Uncle Dan delay, but he also quickly lowered his head and sent a voice transmission. "Second young miss, I suspect that this Dongfang Yu might not be a king-level quasi-emperor, but an Earth-level quasi-emperor. As you know, only those Earth-level quasi-emperors are interested in the Heaven Desolate pill. The Everlasting sect relied on large amounts of Heaven Desolate pill to win over many factions in the starry heavens. Earth-level quasi-emperor? In that case, this Dongfang Yu's potential is completely qualified to contend with those geniuses on the Starry Sky rankings." Even though Uncle Dan's guess was very far-fetched, Dan Ling still stood up from her chair with a shocked expression. She immediately disappeared from the hall without even drinking her tea. Soon, Dan Ling's figure appeared among the guest elders in the room of an Earth-level quasi-emperor. "Heavenly Elder, there's something I need your help with." Chapter 16:35. Yi Fei did not rest after sending the disciples of the primary elixir sect away. The desolate beast elixir of the primary elixir sect had made him very excited. It was very difficult to raise the level of one's domain. Even if he had mind power and could continuously cultivate the only true domain, which was the strongest domain. It would take a lot of time to raise the level of one's domain. However, the appearance of the Desolate Beast elixir gave Yi Fei hope of raising the level of his domain quickly. It also made him understand why there were so many heaven-grade quasi-emperors in the galaxy. These people are obviously not exceptional geniuses, but they can raise their domain to the heaven grade. This must be the effect of the Desolate Beast elixir. Yi Fei recalled his experience in Scorching Sun City when the beast cores of the Desolate Beasts were being collected. At that time, he did not understand why the Scorching Sun sect was so interested in the beast cores of the Desolate Beasts. Now, he understood that the Scorching Sun sect was collecting the beast cores to exchange for the Sky Desolate elixir. Obviously, the Desolate Beast elixir was the most important raw material for refining the Desolate Beast elixir. At the same time, this elixir was definitely unique to the galaxy. It was impossible to see it in the Tianwu continent. Yi Fei could not help but be tempted. He thought to himself, these Desolate Beast elixirs are special treasures of the ancient path of the galaxy. If I can bring a large number of Desolate Beast elixirs back to the Tianwu continent, it will be a qualitative leap for both the family Yi and the real Martial Sacred Institute, especially for Uncle Jian and Luo Shi. They, and the children of the divine Yi sect. Their potential was not very good. If they comprehended on their own, it would probably take them a few hundred years to comprehend their domain and break through to the quasi-emperor level. However, if there were a large number of Desolate Beast elixirs, it might only take 10 years, or even less for a large number of quasi-emperors to appear in the family Yi and the real Martial Sacred Institute. As he thought of this, Yi Fei became even more excited. He immediately decided to find Uncle Dan and ask him how to obtain a large number of Desolate Beast elixirs. The moment Yi Fei stepped out of his room, an old man in a raincoat walked in. Silently, an old man in a straw raincoat walked into his courtyard. He said coldly, "You are Dong Fangyu. I have been asked by the Heavy Cauldron sect to take your life. Die." Heavy Cauldron sect, you were sent by Ma Tai? Yi Fei was secretly surprised. He could not understand why there were suddenly killers from the Heavy Cauldron sect here, which was obviously the guest area of the Dan Yuan sect. Could it be that Ma Tai bribed a guest of the Dan Yuan sect to kill me? At this time, Yi Fei didn't have time to think. As the old man spoke, he had already thrown the fishing rod in his hand towards Yi Fei. The fishing rod quickly enlarged and turned into a divine spear of heaven and earth. With the power to pierce through the void, it ruthlessly pierced towards Yi Fei. Earth-level quasi-emperor? Yi Fei snorted coldly. Sensing the old man's earth-grade aura, he immediately snorted. He knew that a Tai Chi domain might not be able to stop him. He immediately roared and activated the fury of the Azure Dragon. This was an immemorial heaven skill that was most suitable for close combat. Boom! Yi Fei's body shone with a resplendent golden light, filled with a demonic nature and seething killing intent. When he executed the fury of the Azure Dragon, he also activated the Battle Demon Dao. Instantly, his physical body became as tough as a quasi-divine equipment. A quasi-divine equipment was enough to block the attack of an Earth-level quasi-emperor. Bang! The old man's fishing rod turned into a divine spear and pierced Yi Fei's body. The golden light that erupted from Yi Fei's body was scattered. Clear cracks also appeared on the black tortoise armor that appeared on his body. Yi Fei was somewhat astonished. This old man's attack power is very high. He is definitely not an ordinary Earth-level quasi-emperor. However, he is still unable to break through the defense of my physical body. This is my advantage. Kill. Fury of the Azure Dragon. Boom, boom, boom. Golden light bloomed from Yi Fei's body as the Azure Dragon revolved around him. At this time, he was like a golden battle demon, an enraged Azure Dragon. His huge dragon claws smashed out, tearing the void apart. His blazing fiery wings flapped, and the surroundings were immediately covered in raging flames. Chi! Yi Fei stretched out his left hand with a dragon claw. However, His right hand suddenly turned into a tiger claw. Azure dragon heaven suppressing prison. White tiger escaping cage. Vermilion bird splitting the firmament. Black tortoise suppressing mountains and rivers. Yi Fei's figure turned into countless afterimages, carrying the ferocity of the white tiger, the might of the azure dragon, the explosiveness of the vermilion bird, and the gravity of the black tortoise. These afterimages continuously pressed towards the old man in the woven rush raincoat. Even though the old man was an earth-level quasi-emperor, shock and horror filled his face. How old are you? To think that you can cultivate two king-grade domains at the same time. Furthermore, you can refine your physical body to the level of a quasi-divine equipment. Damn it, this old man cannot lose. Kill. Milky Way divine spear. Silver beyond the heavens river, shattering the sky. The spear light shook the surroundings, tearing the sky apart and revealing a huge silver river in the starry heavens. That was not a true Milky Way, but a concrete manifestation of the old man's spear light. He merged the countless spear lights into this special river. The rolling stars in the river were extremely sharp. The special spear lights were extremely sharp. At this moment, the old man's spear could pierce through the void and shatter the firmament. However, when these spear lights approached Yi Fei, a piercing golden light shone from Yi Fei's body. Dragon roars rang out endlessly as Yi Fei turned into a human-shaped dragon beast. The wind and clouds stirred up, and the might and pressure of the world. Boom, boom, boom. Just like that, the stars in the Milky Way were smashed apart by Yi Fei's fists one after another. Then, these fists gathered together to form a demonic fist that looked like a golden sun that blasted out ahead. Fist of life and death. One fist could decide life and death. One fist could decide yin and yang. Yi Fei's fist instantly split the silver river in front of him into two halves. The sky was filled with shattered spear lights. Impossible. You actually used your physical body to shatter my silver divine spear. Pooh! The old man in the woven rush raincoat was angered and injured. He immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. At this moment, the old man no longer looked at Yi Fei as a junior. Instead, he looked at him as a strong and insurmountable mountain. Last Dan, where did you find such a monster? A king-grade quasi-emperor is actually suppressing an earth-grade quasi-emperor like me. This old man cannot hold on for much longer. Young Master Dongfang, please stop. This is a fight, just a test. This is the final test before you become a guest elder. Dan Ling was startled as well. She originally thought that she had already overestimated Yi Fei by inviting the heavenly spear venerable. However, when Yi Fei truly displayed combat prowess, even Dan Ling, a vice sectmaster, felt her heart skip a beat. Just a test? Why didn't you say so earlier? Why did you try to kill me the moment you met? Anger appeared on Yi Fei's face. Even if he had to rely on the core pill sect to obtain the heavenly desolate pill, Dan Ling's action still made him very upset. However, Dan Ling was a vice sectmaster after all. She knew how to handle things. When she sensed Yi Fei's anger, she immediately dropped her stance. She lowered her head and apologized. Young Master Dongfang, please understand. However, this is one of the rules of being a guest elder. After all, we have to know the specific combat prowess of the guest elder first. Chapter 1636. Is there a need to test me like this? Are you doubting my strength and thinking that I am not worthy of being a guest elder? Yi Fei was still very angry. Even though he was very interested in the primary pill sect's heavenly desolate pill, Dan Linger's test made him feel uncomfortable. Dan Linger apologized again sincerely. Young Master Dongfang, I was rash this time. I apologize to you on behalf of the primary pill sect. I did not want to do this either. However, the pill cauldron battle is about to begin. We need to understand the strength of every guest elder in order to win. As compensation, I can give you 2 Earth Desolate pills. This way, you might be able to break through to Earth stage Quasi-Emperor before the pill cauldron battle. As Dan Linger spoke, two strange pills emitting a shocking, desolate chi slowly flew toward Yi Fei. Yi Fei grabbed them out of curiosity. He discovered that these two earth-desolate pills were miniature desolate beasts. However, the desolate beasts were not made of flesh and blood, but various nourishing spirit herbs and natural resources. Treasures. This is the earth-desolate pill. If I refine it, my king domain will break through to Earth stage? Yi Fei was very shocked. His original goal was the heavenly desolate pill. After all, with the help of the Earth Formation Seed, his talent had transformed from a top-notch genius to a peerless genius. His combat strength was even higher. His combat strength was equivalent to half a demonic genius. Even without the Earth Desolate pill, Yi Fei was confident that he could raise his Taiji domain and Azure Dragon domain from King domain to Earth stage within a month. However, with the help of the Earth Desolate pill, the time needed to raise his domain would be greatly reduced. Thus, he did not reject Dan Linger's good intentions. Seeing Yi Fei accept the Earth Desolate pill, it was clear that he had accepted her apology. Only then did Dan Ling breathe a sigh of relief. Not to mention Yi Fei's astonishing battle prowess. Just the fact that Yi Fei could communicate with the Tyrannosaurus King was enough for the primary Dan sect to recruit him. At this moment, the Sky Spear Elder explained to Yi Fei enviously, "That's right. After refining the Earth Desolate pill, you can have an Earth stage domain. However, the time required is different. It depends on the person's potential. Some people can break through in a few days. Some people need months or even years. You'd better be careful. After all, this is the Pill Cauldron battle. It's about to begin." What is the Battle of the Alchemy Cauldrons? Yi Fei was very curious. He had heard about the Battle of the Alchemy Cauldrons many times. You don't even know about the Battle of Danding, and you came to Danding City to train? Sky Spear Elder suddenly had the urge to vomit blood. After all this time, his reminder earlier was completely in vain. Dan Ling felt a little depressed. She didn't know if Yi Fei was too careless or too greedy. You actually don't know anything? So you only chose to join us because you heard that we have the Heaven Desolate pill? That's right, Yi Fei said confidently. I can't possibly say that it's because I admire you, Vice Sect Master. That's why I should become a foreign dignitary, right? If that's the case, Vice Sect Master, you definitely won't believe it. Dan Ling, Er's face suddenly turned red. She had a kind of bashful beauty. Cough, cough, cough. I am already old. I will not participate in the matters of you youngsters. I will take my leave first. Sky Spear Elder coughed a few times and casually found an excuse to leave. As he left, he sighed in his heart. It is still good to be young. When I meet a young lady, I should make a move. Unfortunately, I am already old. The Sky Spear Elder felt very upset. Even with Dan Ling covering for him, the Sky Spear Elder knew that he was still far from being comparable to Yi Fei. He was a bona fide Earth-grade quasi-emperor, yet he was nearly beaten to a pulp by a Marshal King Jr. This blow was too heavy. The Battle of the Alchemy Cauldrons is the battle between our Alchemy Cauldron sect and the Heavy Cauldron sect, once every 100 years. The purpose of this battle is to seize control of Danding City. We wantonly recruit foreign dignitaries in preparation for the Battle of the Alchemy Cauldron. After all, our two sects are good at refining alchemy and refining tools. Fighting is not our forte. Dan Ling calmed herself down and started to introduce Yi Fei diligently. In the previous Battle of the Alchemy Cauldron, our Alchemy Cauldron sect won. However, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Not only did our foreign dignitaries suffer heavy casualties, but even my grandfather, the previous sect master, died in that battle. He was the only Alchemy Dao quasi-emperor in our Alchemy Dao who was good at fighting. With my grandfather's death, our Alchemy Cauldron sect immediately lost a leader. My father and I are not strong enough to succeed the position of sect master. Hence, our Alchemy Cauldron sect only has a vice sect master and no sect master. The Heavy Cauldron sect will definitely use this opportunity to take back control of Danding City, especially that desolate vein. Dan Ling said. Yi Fei was surprised. He did not have much interest in the battle between the two sections. However, That desolate vein piqued his curiosity. He could not help asking, "What is a desolate vein?" Dan Ling nodded and said, "A desolate vein is a special kind of spirit vein. Only one desolate vein can be born out of 100,000 spirit veins. Currently, we have discovered 3 desolate veins at the bottom of the Starry Heavens Road. 2 of them are in the hands of the Everlasting Sect. The last one is in the hands of the former Alchemy Cauldron Sect. I forgot to mention that one must obtain a desolate vein. Only with a desolate vein can one refine the heavenly desolate pill. Now, do you understand why I asked Elder Tian to test you?" Yi Fei said, "You want me to participate in this battle of the Alchemy Cauldron. Are you willing to participate?" Dan Ling looked at Yi Fei with some anticipation. "Why wouldn't I participate? However, if I win, how many heavenly desolate pills will I get?" Yi Fei did not refuse. Since he knew that there were heavenly desolate pills here that could quickly raise his Heaven Dao domain, he absolutely could not miss this opportunity. As for fighting, that was what he was best at. Yi Fei had absolute confidence in this. Dan Ling's face lit up with joy. She immediately promised, "As long as you foreign dignitaries can help us win the battle of the Alchemy Cauldron, each of you will be rewarded 1 heavenly desolate pill." Only one? Yi Fei was a little dissatisfied. He had 2 domains that needed to be raised to the Heaven Dao domain. Furthermore, a Grade 8 Sky Dragon still needed to condense 8 Heaven Dao domains before it could be considered complete. "Can't you give me a few more?" Yi Fei probed. "Your heavenly desolate pill is like a cabbage. Even if we have a desolate vein, the primary elixir faction will only be able to refine 50 pills within 100 years. Any more, and we will be draining the pond to catch the fish." Dan Linger shook her head helplessly. Yi Fei finally realized that refining the heavenly desolate pill was actually very difficult. This made him a little disappointed. He knew that it was basically impossible to obtain a large amount of heavenly desolate pills in a short period of time. Fortunately, as long as we win this battle of the Alchemy Cauldron, I will also be able to obtain a heavenly desolate pill. It's better than nothing. Yi Fei did not insist. He spoke with Dan Ling for a while longer. Chapter 1637. Since he wanted to cultivate and break through, the best place to cultivate was definitely not the quiet room provided by the Danyuan sect, but the soul-gathering tower owned by Yi Fei. The spiritual energy gathered from 100 spirit veins in the tower was almost equivalent to the total amount of spirit veins in the entire Danyuan sect. After returning to his room, Yi Fei immediately took out the soul-gathering tower and entered the world of spiritual energy inside. After being nourished by the 100 spirit veins, the spiritual energy inside was no longer a small spiritual river. It was clearly a large river. At this moment, Yi Fei was sitting cross-legged on the large river, preparing to cultivate. Xiao Chao also happily ran out of the beast mark space with the dragon turtle and ran around in the world of spiritual energy. But as they ran, Yi Fei kept feeling that something was wrong. After taking a closer look, he suddenly realized that the dragon turtle had suddenly become much fatter. Its originally flat body had now become an oval shape, and its limbs could no longer reach the ground. In the past, Xiao Chao would drag the dragon turtle out by its tail. Now, Xiao Chao could only hold the dragon turtle in his arms with difficulty. It was obvious how fat this idiot had eaten. Yi Fei's eyelids suddenly twitched. He hurriedly looked at the beast mark space and was shocked to find that the dragon turtle had eaten all the spiritual stones inside. Obviously, the dragon turtle also knew that Yi Fei had made a fortune by selling the dragon saliva. This time, it also put in extra effort to eat. In less than a day, tens of millions of spiritual stones were all eaten by the dragon turtle. It was no wonder that the dragon turtle looked like it had eaten too much. Yi Fei felt like vomiting blood. He hurriedly asked Xiao Chao, didn't I ask you to keep an eye on this guy? Why did you let it eat so much in one go? Squeak, squeak. After being reminded by Yi Fei, Xiao Chao suddenly reacted. Then, Xiao Chao's face also darkened. He quickly gestured to tell Yi Fei that the dragon turtle had said that it would start dieting and training after this meal. The dragon turtle also burped and raised a small wooden sign to tell Yi Fei that it had eaten a little too much this time, but when it could walk after digesting the food, it would work hard to train. Yi Fei didn't say anything. He just pretended to be careless and dropped a spirit stone. Immediately, a black mouth stretched out from beside him and accurately bit down on the spirit stone. But as soon as it bit it, the dragon turtle's face darkened. It widened its innocent eyes and stared at Yi Fei. Yi and Xiao Chao's faces even darker. It was very obvious that the so-called training was just an excuse for the dragon turtle to use its black mouth. Big Black, your black mouth is not bad. But don't blame me for not reminding you. I believe that when Ma Tai sees how fat you are in a few days, he won't mind eating you raw. Yi Fei was not angry, which was rare. Instead, he said something unrelated. But it was this that made the dragon turtle's face turn red. Its expression changed drastically, and a layer of cold sweat rolled down its turtle shell. Obviously, even the dragon turtle, who was also a glutton, was frightened by Ma Tai, that abnormal glutton. Then, without Yi Fei's instructions, the dragon turtle learned from its painful experience and jumped into the spirit river not far away with a splash. It started to paddle with all its might to train. Yi Fei also instructed Xiao Chao, "Xiao Chao, look at Big Black. Let it swim 10,000 laps first. If it doesn't finish swimming, don't let it eat a single spiritual stone." Squeak, squeak. Xiao Chao patted his small body and nodded seriously, indicating that Xiao Chao was also very angry now. He would definitely glare at the dragon turtle fiercely. With that, Xiao Chao jumped onto the dragon turtle's back and supervised it seriously. The dragon turtle kept paddling in the spirit river, causing a huge wave of spiritual energy to form in the entire spirit river. Fortunately, this spiritual energy was unable to affect Yi Fei. He took out the 2 Earth Desolation elixirs and used his divine consciousness to check them. There was definitely no problem. Yi Fei then picked up one of the elixirs and started to refine it silently. Heavy Cauldron Sect. Ma Tai and the 4th Elder's expressions were extremely gloomy. They came here in a rage, wanting to capture Yi Fei. In the end, not only did they fail to capture Yi Fei, but they also lost face. This was especially true for the 4th Elder. As a Heaven-grade quasi-emperor, he was defeated by a King-grade junior to the point where he could not fight back. This greatly damaged the 4th Elder's prestige. When he returned, the 4th Elder said to Ma Tai fiercely, "Ma Tai, we can't let this matter go. That Dongfang Yu brat, no matter what, we have to think of a way to kill him." Ma Tai was also very unwilling. He said gloomily in his heart, "That brat has the dragon turtle that I need the most. Compared to the 4th Elder, I want to kill him more. However, he is now a guest of the primary elixir sect. It will be very difficult for us to make a move on him." That might not be the case. I heard that the sect master recently received a very honorable guest in secret. This person will not only affect the outcome of this elixir cauldron battle, but will also determine the future of our elixir cauldron city. You might as well ask your father to introduce you to this honorable guest, as long as the sect master agrees. Not to mention killing Dongfang Yu, even destroying the entire primary elixir sect, is just a matter of a word from the honorable guest. A fervent look flashed in the 4th Elder's eyes. The 4th Elder was a Heaven-grade quasi-emperor. Why did he have to curry favor with Ma Tai, standing up for him in everything? Just Ma Tai's identity as the young sect master was not enough to make the 4th Elder lose face. The 4th Elder's true purpose was to use Ma Tai to get to know this honorable guest that only the sect master could get to know. This would pave the way for his future. Furthermore, after the incident at the primary elixir tavern, the 4th Elder believed that with Ma Tai's cruel and bloodthirsty character, he would not take this lying down. Sure enough, when Ma Tai heard the 4th Elder's suggestion, although he was a little hesitant and worried that he would be punished by his father for recommending an important guest without permission, when he thought about how he had lost face in the hands of Yi Fei and the importance of the dragon turtle, Matai still hardened his heart and said in a deep voice, "All right, fourth elder, as long as you have a way. Kill that Dongfang Yu and bring his dragon turtle to me. I will introduce you to this honorable guest." "Haha, don't worry, young sect master. I don't have any other abilities, but when it comes to strategizing, no one in the entire Heavy Cauldron sect would dare to claim that I am the second best. Damn the primary elixir sect. Damn the lowly people of the land. How dare they humiliate me in public? I must take revenge." Humph. The fourth elder snorted coldly and immediately began to inquire about the details of meeting the honorable guest. When he mentioned the honorable guest, the fourth elder's expression was at least 10 times more respectful than the sect master of the Heavy Cauldron sect. Splash! Splash! Above the spirit river, the dragon turtle was still paddling. It was having a hard time paddling because Xiao Chao was sitting on its back. If it stopped for even a moment, it might attract Xiao Chao's vine whip. Regarding this, the dragon turtle marked Yi Fei on its black wooden token. Then it began to roll around Yi Fei on purpose, making all kinds of big movements. It hoped to disturb Yi Fei's cultivation and force Yi Fei to end this inhumane paddling exercise. Unfortunately, the dragon turtle's plan fell through in the end. Yi Fei was a cultivation maniac. Once he started cultivating, Yi Fei might not even look up at the dragon turtle, even if it roared in his ear, much less if the dragon turtle flopped around him. The effect of the Earth Desolation Elixir was unexpectedly good. After refining the first Earth Desolation Elixir, it only took Yi Fei a day to raise his Tai Chi domain from the king level to the earth level. Chapter 1638. The 8-level sky dragon wasn't an immemorial sky technique, but a heavenly venerate technique that was even more powerful. Cultivating the 8-level sky dragon was only the first step. The second step was to use these 8 sky dragons to form 8 different elemental domains. This way, the might of the 8-level sky dragon would reach the level of an immemorial sky technique. The third step was to condense these 8 domains into nomological laws. This was a height that only martial gods and heavenly venerates could reach. Yi Fei could only dream about it. It was simply impossible for him to achieve it. After all, his current strength was only at the heaven-grade boundary emperor level. Yi Fei was far from being able to gather all 8 domains, let alone the nomological laws that only martial gods could comprehend. However, I now have the Earth-grade Green Dragon domain and the Tai Chi domain. If I can successfully pass the alchemy battle, I will be able to obtain the Desolate Sky elixir and raise these 2 domains to the heaven grade. This means that I can put these 2 domains aside. I could try to condense the 6th domain, the Flame domain. The final form of the 8-level Sky Dragon was the 8 trigrams, which represented heaven, earth, wind, thunder, water, fire, mountain, and lake. The Green Dragon, Blood Demon, Ice, and Thunder domains represented the Heaven Trigram, Earth Trigram, Water Trigram, and Thunder Trigram respectively. Yi Fei had already mastered them. Now, he was trying to master the 5th Trigram. Yi Fei thought about it and decided that the Fire Trigram was the most suitable. After all, he had once mastered the Burning Sky technique and had now mastered the Vermilion Bird Divine Sword. Mastering the power of flames wouldn't be too difficult for him. That's right. It is entirely possible for the current me to master a new domain, the Vermilion Bird domain, which is also the Flame domain. Yi Fei's eyes flashed with determination. At the same time, the image of a blazing vermilion bird appeared behind him. Then, the image of the vermilion bird gradually became blurry. The torch-like flames slowly formed the image of a special divine flame phoenix. The vermilion bird is a type of phoenix. It is also a special divine beast of the heavens and earth. It suppresses all directions and controls the southly karmic fire. My vermilion bird divine sword was born from flames. My vermilion bird domain will be reborn from flames. Undying sword soul burn. Boom. As he deduced the vermilion bird territory, Yi Fei quickly awakened the undying sword soul. Even though the undying sword soul no longer had any thunder tribulation liquid, the power of the Sword Soul could still increase Yi Fei's power of comprehension infinitely. His perception grew stronger and stronger, and the light of wisdom in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. For many people, it would take years or decades to comprehend a domain. For Yi Fei, he only needed a few months or even a few days to comprehend the profound meaning of fire. Then, he would be able to use this profound to create the purest form of a domain. While Yi Fei was cultivating, the day of the alchemy battle between the primary elixir sect and the heavy cauldron sect was gradually approaching. The entire alchemy tripod city became somber. The guest elders of the core elixir sect and the heavy cauldron sect also became nervous. They began to walk around and inquire about the candidates for the battle of the elixir cauldron. Sigh. Ever since the alchemy cauldron sect split into the core elixir sect and the heavy cauldron sect, the battle of the elixir cauldron has become more and more brutal. I wonder which 3 of our 36 guest elders will represent the core elixir sect in the battle against the heavy cauldron sect? Is there need to ask? Our 36 guest elders are all ranked according to their strength. Among them, the Sky Spear Elder has already been in charge of the first hall for a long time. The Sky Spear Elder will definitely take part in this battle of the elixir cauldron sect. It's a pity that the white-haired patriarch of the second hall is old and his lifespan has already dried up. As the saying goes, the older you get, the more you fear death. Just yesterday, the white-haired patriarch resigned from his position as a guest elder and plans to retire and return to his hometown. An insider revealed this piece of news. The other guest elders who had gathered were all shocked and said together, "The white-haired patriarch is shameless." The core elixir sect has worshipped him for more than 70 years. In the end, when they're in need of people, he actually resigned and avoided the battle. It had to be said that many guest elders were quite loyal to the core elixir sect, especially those who had lived here for more than 10 years. They more or less had feelings for this place. These people were also particularly dissatisfied with the white-haired patriarch's sudden resignation. Hearing these discussions, the white-haired patriarch, who was walking towards them, suddenly had an ugly expression. He shouted in a gloomy tone, "Don't spread rumors. It's not that the old ancestor is heartless, but that maidservant, Dan Ling is too unbridled. If she had agreed to the old ancestor's conditions, and given the old ancestor a heavenly desolate pill in advance, how could the old ancestor not fight for her? However, this maidservant does not distinguish between good and bad. Not only did she reject the old ancestor, she even wanted a new quasi-emperor to fight for the old ancestor. How could the old ancestor tolerate such humiliation? Dong Fangyu. Who is that? Is he also one of our guest elders? I don't think I've ever heard of him or seen him before. I seem to have heard of this matter before. I heard that this person is rather arrogant. He actually dared to attack the Demon King Big-Bellied Ma Tai in Pill Cauldron City and nearly killed him. Later, Ma Tai came to the core elixir inn to cause trouble and alerted Vice Sect Master Dan Linger. This person also became a guest elder. To think that someone like this could become a guest elder and even participate in the Pill Cauldron battle. This group of guest elders was somewhat stunned. While they secretly envied Yi Fei's dogs at luck, they could not help doubting Yi Fei's strength. After all, Yi Fei's public identity was only a king realm quasi-emperor. Among the many guest elders, he was at the bottom. However, Dan Ling had appointed Yi Fei to replace the white-haired patriarch, who demanded an exorbitant price. No wonder the white-haired patriarch flew into a rage out of humiliation and threatened to retire. However, before retiring, the white-haired patriarch needed to teach this Dong Fangyu a lesson. Firstly, he needed to vent his anger. Secondly, he needed to show Dan Ling that the core elixir sect would suffer a great loss without him. Perhaps this could change Dan Ling's attitude and get her to give him the heavenly desolate pill in advance. With such a goal in mind, the white-haired patriarch released a strong, baleful aura. When he heard that someone knew about Yi Fei's situation, he immediately stretched out his shriveled hand and grabbed that Earth-grade quasi-emperor's shoulder. He said, "Very good. Among us, you are the most well-informed. Tell me, where is that Dongfang you brat now?" White-haired patriarch, "I don't know about that, either. That newcomer called Dongfang Yu has not shown himself since he became a guest elder." "Oh, right. I heard that Vice Sect Master Dan Ling rewarded him with a large number of spirit stones. Perhaps he is still in closed-door cultivation. Try to use those spirit stones to break through." Dan Ling, or had the Heavenly Spear Old Man test Yifei? Since the Heavenly Spear Old Man lost too miserably, neither Dan Ling nor the Heavenly Spear Old Man would say anything. Chapter 1639. Damn it, he is a newcomer with no ability at all. He just looks young and has a pretty face. Dan Linger rewarded him with a large number of spirit stones. I, the white-haired old ancestor, have fought hard for the Essence Core sect for more than 70 years. Yet, Dan Linger is not even willing to give me a heavenly desolate pill in advance. How preposterous! The more the white-haired old ancestor spoke, the angrier he got. However, his words, if they landed in the ears of the other guests, they would be a joke. How could the people present not know that the white-haired old ancestor was insatiably greedy? While it was true that he fought hard for the Essence Core sect, he had also secretly obtained a lot of benefits. If not for this old demon being too strong and making some contributions to the Essence Core sect, the two Vice Sect Masters would have chased him out long ago. Indeed, the Heavenly Desolate Pill is extremely precious. A desolate vein can only refine 30 to 50 pills every 100 years. This old demon is really shameless. He has not even started the battle, and he is already asking for benefits. However, this has nothing to do with us. The white-haired old ancestor has a bad temper and is very strong. This is especially so in recent years. He knows that his lifespan is about to run out, so his methods are even more ruthless. We cannot afford to offend him. It is just unfortunate that the new guest elder called Dongfang Yu offended the white-haired old ancestor for no reason. However, Vice Sect Master Dan Linger also did not handle this matter well. How could she let a king-grade quasi-emperor participate in the pill cauldron battle? This clearly angered the white-haired old ancestor. While the white-haired old ancestor interrogated Yi Fei for information, the other guest elders just watched coldly from the side. They even sent voice projections to each other and discussed this. Clearly, Dan Linger's decision to let Yi Fei participate in the pill cauldron battle not only upset the white-haired old ancestor, but also some of the quasi-emperors who wanted to participate but did not have a spot. At this moment, the more sinister ones immediately egged the white-haired old ancestor on. White-haired old ancestor, what is the point of being angry here? If you are capable, go to that brat's place and challenge him back then. There was competition among the guest elders as well. This competition was based on ranking. The Core Elixir sect would also have more offerings. However, it was rare to see someone with a higher ranking challenging someone with a lower ranking. This was especially so when the white-haired old man, as the second-ranked guest elder, challenged the last-ranked Yifei. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed like he was bullying the weak. If it were any other quasi-emperor, they would definitely hesitate. However, the white-haired old ancestor did not hesitate at all. He came from the demonic Tao in the first place, where the strong preyed on the weak. He also wanted to make an example out of Dan Linger, forcing her to change her mind and agree to give him the heavenly desolate pill in advance. Furthermore, Yi Fei's strength as a king-grade quasi-emperor made the white-haired old ancestor feel that he was the easiest chicken to kill. Hence, the white-haired old ancestor no longer had any misgivings. He immediately roared furiously. "Let's go, then. What ability does that brat have? He is just a pretty boy who stole Dan Linger's soul. I want the primary core sect to wake up and let them know that even if that pretty boy's surname Dongfang carries my shoes, I will still find him too lowly." Boom. Many people of the demonic Tao were lawless. The white-haired old ancestor's lifespan was already exhausted. He knew that he could not break through to heaven-grade quasi-emperor. Now that he was about to die, he no longer had any misgivings. After all, barging into another person's cultivation area was the greatest taboo for cultivators. It was also something that the primary core sect prohibited. However, in the white-haired old ancestor's rage, he relied on his seniority and strength to ignore all of this. He directly charged towards the 36th room, where Yi Fei was. The expressions of many of the guest elders changed slightly. They understood that this new guest elder was in trouble. If things went wrong, the white-haired old ancestor might even kill him on the spot. Oh no, this matter seems to have blown up. We have to immediately inform Vice Sect Master Dan Ling about this matter. Many of the guest elders became nervous and excited. Some of them immediately took out their voice projection mirrors and told Dan Ling about what happened here. At this moment, Dan Ling was discussing the white-haired old ancestor's matter with the elders of the sect. When she heard that the white-haired old ancestor's threats were not enough, and that he actually went to attack Yi Fei, her delicate body could not help bursting with intense rage and murderous intent. Immediately, an elder asked anxiously, "Vice Sect Master, what should we do? The Pill Cauldron battle is about to start. If these guest elders start an internal conflict first, reckless. If he wants to go, let him go." Dan Ling smiled coldly. She had seen Yi Fei's strength for herself. However, when she thought about how Yi Fei was dissatisfied with her probing him previously, she thought for a while and ordered, "Uncle Dan, go and ask the Heavenly Venerate to come out." Among the guest elders, only the Heavenly Venerate can suppress the white-haired old ancestor. Yes, Uncle Dan could not be bothered with saluting. He immediately rushed out of the sect master's hall and prepared to look for the Sky Spear Elder. At the same time, the white-haired old ancestor arrived outside the 36th courtyard with large strides. Kid with the surname Dongfang, the old ancestor knows that you are hiding inside. I will count to 3 and immediately come out, kowtow, and admit your wrongs. Then I will spare your life. Boom! As he spoke, the white-haired patriarch deliberately used his quintessential origin energy, causing his voice to turn into a terrifying sonic boom that continuously shattered the surrounding defensive array formation. The tiles and bricks of the courtyard were also shaken and shattered everywhere. However, just as the white-haired old ancestor was about to shatter Yi Fei's cultivation room in a spurt of energy, a tyrannical figure suddenly appeared in front of the white-haired old ancestor. "White Demon, what are you doing?" At that moment, the one who appeared was naturally the Sky Spear Old Man. When he saw the shattered tiles in the courtyard, the Sky Spear Old Man's eyes shrunk. Others might not know, but he knew very well that the person who lived in the courtyard wasn't a junior. It was obviously a ferocious tiger that devoured humans. Suddenly, an aura of fury appeared on his body. The white-haired old ancestor was also startled. He asked fearfully, "Sky Spear, why did you intervene when I was looking for trouble with this junior?" "Humph! If I didn't intervene, White Demon, could it be that you have forgotten the rules of the Danyuan sect? Even if it is a challenge from a guest, it must be done according to the rules. You have gone too far by directly destroying someone's courtyard." A cold light flashed in the Sky Spear Elder's eyes. This cold light finally made the white-haired old ancestor completely furious. He immediately said coldly, "It seems that I have guessed correctly. Dan Ling has indeed fallen in love with this Dongfang gigolo. In order to elevate him, not only did she let him participate in the battle of the Elixir Cauldron and snatch my position, she even asked you to help her. However, I, White Demon, am not to be trifled with. Dongfang brat, get out here. The old ancestor wants to fight with you. Today, the old ancestor will let you, a lowly person from the mainland, know the power of a starry sky martial artist." The white-haired old ancestor roared again. This also made the Sky Spear Elder's expression suddenly change. He was afraid that the white-haired old ancestor's provocation would cause Yi Fei to be unhappy and cause an internal conflict between the guests. He immediately wanted to intervene and stop the white-haired old ancestor's unreasonable provocation. Creak! At this moment, the door opened. Chapter 1640. Boom! The white-haired old ancestor stared at the wooden tablet, so angry that his eyes looked like they would pop out. The Sky Spear old man also stared at the wooden tablet, swallowing hard. The other guests and the dozens of gazes also stared at the wooden tablet. However, all of them revealed extreme rage on their faces. Although they had heard that this newcomer called Dongfang Yu was extremely arrogant, they could understand this person putting on airs before a martial monarch like Ma Tai. After all, he was a quasi-emperor. Of course, he had the dignity of a quasi-emperor. However, the crux was that this quasi-emperor was only a king-level quasi-emperor. Which of the guests here was not an earth-level quasi-emperor? They were all Dongfang Yu's seniors. Before them, a king-level quasi-emperor was just trash, an ant. However, this ant was actually arrogant enough to send out a black tortoise to send them away. Furthermore, he even publicly set up a wooden tablet telling all the guests to scram. If they did not scram, he would not take responsibility even if they were beaten to death. What kind of arrogance is this? What kind of madness is this? Who's he think he is? He is just a king-level quasi-emperor. Don't stop me. This is infuriating this old man to death. This junior is full of evil. He is simply a demon. Demon Dongfang. How dare you underestimate us? Stop talking. Charge in and drag this ignorant and arrogant little demon out. Beat him to death. When the dragon tortoise set up the small wooden tablet, all the guests immediately flew into a rage. The white-haired old ancestor was so angry that his white hair stood up like silver needles. Little demon Dongfang, how could you do this? Not only will this old ancestor kill you, but I will also whip your corpse. Boom. The white-haired old ancestor was thoroughly enraged. Not only did he use his aura to shatter the small wooden tablet, but he also surged with demonic chi, wanting to smash Yi Fei's room into smithereens. Demon Bai, why are you still not stopping? Did you not hear what little friend Dongfang said? He told you to scram. Do you still dare to not scram? The Sky Spear old man finally came to his senses. In the eyes of others, Yi Fei's behavior was very arrogant. However, in the eyes of the Sky Spear elder, Yi Fei was just stating facts. After all, Yi Fei's combat strength was there for all to see. A king-stage quasi-emperor could suppress an earth-stage quasi-emperor like him. Not to mention that Yi Fei had obtained 2 Earth-Desolate pills. It was possible for him to break through to the Earth-level quasi-emperor realm. At this moment, the white-haired patriarch was courting death by attacking Yi Fei. He had implicated everyone present and was courting death with him. After all, the wooden plaque clearly stated that Yi Fei wanted them all to scram. If they didn't, they would really die. Furthermore, the Sky Spear Elder had also heard that when Yi Fei had just entered the city, he had almost slapped the big-bellied Demon King, Ma Tai, to death at the city gate. From then on, he had formed a grudge with the Heavy Cauldron sect. At this moment, if the white-haired old ancestor dared to anger Yi Fei, this child might really unleash his demonic nature and beat up everyone here. If they died, the Core sect's guest elders would all die before the Pill Cauldron battle even started. As the first guest elder, the Sky Spear Elder had a deep relationship with Dan Lang-er. At this moment, the Sky Spear Elder had no choice but to roar and suddenly thrust his spear at the white-haired old ancestor. The white-haired old ancestor was immediately startled. As he retreated in a fluster, he roared in disbelief, "Sky Spear, are you crazy? This old ancestor did not provoke you. Why do you want to go against me? Humph, you did not provoke me. However, since you provoked little friend Dongfang, this old man cannot ignore it. Let me give you a word of advice. Leave immediately. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for being merciless with my spear." The Sky Spear Elder took out the strange treasure fishing rod that he carried with him. Then a somber chi surged out of his body. This murderous aura caused the white-haired old ancestor and the guest elders present to retreat frantically in shock. After all, the title of the #1 guest elder wasn't just for show. It was earned through the Sky Spear old man's 40 years of hard work. Even the white-haired old ancestor did not dare to provoke the Sky Spear Elder. Instead, he suppressed his anger with a sullen face and roared, Good. Good. This old ancestor understands now. It is not you who wants to go against me. It is that bitch Damling who wants you to go against me. The ancestor was right. This lowly servant was really. This bitch actually took a fancy to that pretty boy from the continent. Damling, who does not distinguish between loyalty and treachery. Old dog Sky Spear, you are helping the tiger do evil. This old ancestor will definitely make you regret it. Boom. Filled with boundless rage, the white-haired old ancestor tore apart the primary pill sect's small world. He did not even say goodbye, leaving the sect in a fit of rage and leaving the ranks of guest elders. Of course, the white-haired old ancestor felt very sullen in his heart. Originally, he wanted to use Yi Fei as an example to force Dan Ling, to give him the heavenly desolate pill in advance. In the end, he did not obtain the heavenly desolate pill. For the sake of his face, he had no choice but to sulk and leave the primary pill sect. The moment the white-haired old ancestor left the primary pill sect, he was so angry that he vomited a mouthful of blood. Then, without saying anything else, he flew to the heavy cauldron sect's entrance, filled with resentment. The other guest elders were shocked as well. No one had expected the Sky Spear Elder to support Yi Fei so strongly. Then, they inevitably started to be influenced by the white-haired old ancestor's words and started muttering to themselves. The Sky Spear Elder actually did not hesitate to fall out with the white-haired old ancestor for the sake of a king-grade Quasi-Emperor Jr. This is somewhat strange. Could it be that what the white-haired old ancestor said is true? Vice Sect Master Dan Ling really took a fancy to this Eastern demon and wants to keep him as a gigolo? That is extremely possible. Vice Sect Master Dan Ling is not young anymore. It is time for her to think of a man. Eastern demon, I swear that I will not coexist with you. Give me back my Dan Ling, Give me back my Vice Sect Master. Damn it. Why is the man that the Vice Sect Master is thinking of not me? I really want to beat this Eastern demon to death. At this moment, Yi Fei did not know that the small wooden tablet that the dragon tortoise set up had already turned the outside world into a pot of porridge. He had not done anything yet, but for some unknown reason, he had gained the title of demon. The reason why he did not participate in the battle was that his vermilion bird domain had reached the most critical moment. Now, he was fully activating his mental nebula to transform the vermilion bird profound that had just formed into the vermilion bird domain. In addition, he also had to cultivate the immemorial heavenly technique. Yi Fei was extremely busy at this moment. How could he have the time to go out and accept the challenge? Therefore, when he sensed that the white-haired old ancestor had destroyed his courtyard and wanted to use such humiliation to force him to take action, Yi Fei could only hold back his anger for the time being. He only let the dragon tortoise go out and put up a no-battle sign. At the very least, he did not want to be disturbed before the vermilion bird domain was formed. Coincidentally, the dragon tortoise also came back after putting up the no-battle sign. Yi Fei separated a trace of his consciousness and asked the dragon tortoise, "How is it? Did you put up the no-battle sign? Tell them that I will go out when I successfully cultivate the domain. Accept the challenge and ask them to wait for a while." Did they agree? Chapter 1641. Yi Fei did not think too much about it when he heard that the dragon turtle had already dismissed the group of guests. After all, his main goal now was to improve his vermilion bird domain. As his spiritual energy continued to pour in, his vermilion bird esoteric meaning began to strengthen and transform. Gradually, a fiery world appeared behind Yi Fei. Yi Fei's face lit up with joy. The appearance of the fiery world proved that his vermilion bird domain had already been formed. However, the newly formed vermilion bird domain was only at the lowest level, the mortal domain. This made Yi Fei a little unhappy. Since he was going to form a new domain, the mortal domain was still too low. Since there were still a few days before the Pill Cauldron battle, Yi Fei decided to use these few days to push this mortal domain to the king domain. Of course, before that, he had to let the vermilion bird domain merge with the 8 extreme heavenly dragons. The vermilion bird is the main fire. It could transform into fire and form the fire trigram. Following Yi Fei's inner voice, the 8 heavenly dragons rushed out from his body. Other than the ice dragon, blood dragon, azure dragon, and lightning dragon, one of the remaining 4 ordinary heavenly dragons suddenly raised its neck and opened its mouth. Like a heavenly dragon swallowing the sun, it swallowed Yi Fei's newly formed vermilion bird domain. The vermilion bird domain swallowed Yi Fei in one gulp. Inside the spirit gathering tower, a dragon's roar shook the sky. The entire place was filled with raging flames. In the raging flames, the ordinary celestial dragon was instantly melted into a ball of flames. And in the flames, a new fire dragon was reborn. The moment the fire dragon was formed, the originally silent ice dragon suddenly raised its head. It roared with its head. Then, the 2 dragons confronted each other. Ice and fire spat at each other. Behind Yi Fei, a magical world of water and fire was formed. At this moment, Yi Fei also gathered his strength. There was a loud bang in his body. All the cells in his body turned into endless whirlpools, swallowing all the spiritual energy in the spirit river into his body. Then, it turned into a majestic true origin chi that continuously merged with the fire dragon. The fire dragon's power suddenly became stronger. It was getting stronger and stronger, but it still couldn't resist the pressure of the heaven-level ice dragon. However, with the support of Yi Fei's boundless vital energy, the fire dragon also began to continuously improve and transform. Naturally, Yi Fei, who was immersed in cultivation, had long forgotten about the guests outside. The dragon turtle was also busy with its black mouth and desperately searching for spirit stones everywhere. It actually forgot to remind Yi Qingyu. Fly. Damn it. That eastern demon is really arrogant. The day of the pill cauldron battle is about to begin. All the guests have already arrived, but he's nowhere to be seen. Sigh, that devil was just lucky. Vice Sect Leader Dan Ling took a fancy to him. Otherwise, I would have been the first to fight him. Don't talk. The 2 Vice Sect leaders are here. Dan Ling and Dan Ling father, Dan Yuanzi, didn't dare to neglect the Dan Yuan School and the Heavy Cauldron School. Early in the morning, the 2 Vice Sect leaders had already arrived at the guest courtyard, ready to gather everyone and go to the city to hold the battle. But what made Dan Ling feel strange was that Yi Fei hadn't shown up yet. Dan Yuanzi's face turned black on the spot. Even if he was obsessed with alchemy and didn't care about the secular world, he had heard a lot of bad rumors recently. At this time, Dan Yuanzi couldn't help but burst out, Ling you're too much. No matter how much you favor that Dongfang you should at least support him. It's too much for him to avoid the white-haired ancestors challenge. Now that the pill cauldron battle is such a big event, he actually dares to be late. You could have raised any pretty boy, but you have raised the most useless one. Hearing this, Dan Ling's delicate body trembled violently. Then she stomped her feet angrily and said, Father, what nonsense are you talking about? Your daughter is wholeheartedly for the Dan Yuan sect. How could I do such a thing? Besides, this Master Dongfang is not what you think. His real strength. Dan Yuanzi waved his hand impatiently and said, Don't say anything more. In short, I won't agree to your matter. Come, immediately call that Dongfang Yu out. If he doesn't come out, then tell him to get lost. He's a big man. Of all things he can do, but he just has to sit down and do such a useless thing. What a stupid move. In Dan Yuanzi's view, Yi Fei didn't dare to fight with a white-haired ancestor, which was cowardice. Now he was deliberately late, which was even more cowardly. He was already dissatisfied with Yi Fei, and now he was extremely dissatisfied. Dan Ling wanted to explain, but she was afraid that if she said it in public, it would make the Sky Spear Elder's face look bad. Dan Ling was very depressed. In the end, she could only order Uncle Dan, who was beside her, Uncle Dan, go call Dongfang Yu and ask him to come quickly. No need to wait for him. Our Dan Yuan sect has many guests. It doesn't matter if he goes or not. Since he's a coward, it doesn't matter if he doesn't go. It'll save us from disgrace. Let's go. Dan Yuenzi was very stubborn and immediately issued the order. The other guests had long been dissatisfied with Yi Fei, or secretly jealous. At this time, they certainly wouldn't speak up for him. On the contrary, except for the Sky Spear Elder, everyone followed Dan Yuenzi and rose into the sky, ready to participate in this pill cauldron battle. Dan Ling could only smile bitterly. Apart from ordering Uncle Dan to quickly find Yi Fei, she could only take the Sky Spear Elder and quickly follow up. At this moment, Yi Fei didn't know that some rumors had aroused Dan Yuenzi's strong dissatisfaction with him. He had long been immersed in cultivation, to the point where he forgot about everything. Originally, Yi Fei had told the dragon turtle that the time was up, so he immediately reminded him. However, the dragon turtle was chased around by Xiao Qiao with a vine whip all day long. He was so busy that he actually forgot about this matter completely. In the end, it was Yi Fei who suddenly woke up at the critical moment. Oh no, I remember that today is the day of the pill cauldron battle. Although I'm not familiar with Danling, she gave me 2 Earth Desolation pills. I have to return this favor. This stupid turtle, he didn't even remind him when the time was up. Instead, he turned around and reduced his food. Yi Fei slowly withdrew the flame aura on his body and looked at the dragon turtle angrily. Only when he found that the dragon turtle had been chased around by Xiao Qiao, foaming at the mouth and becoming thinner, did Yi Fei's anger dissipate a lot. I'll let it go this time. If there's a next time, I'll directly slaughter it and make soup. I hope I won't be late if I rush over now. Yi Fei hurriedly recalled Xiao Qiao and the dragon turtle, then put the Qi-gathering pagoda into his space belt. Only then did he walk out of the room somewhat gloomily. He saw Uncle Dan's figure hurrying over. Young Master Dongfang, you've finally come out. The pill cauldron battle has already begun, but you still haven't appeared. Deputy Sect Master Dan Yuenzi has already lost his temper and brought people over in advance. Even though Uncle Dan was complaining, his expression was still very respectful. Chapter 1642. King Class Domain. Strange. Didn't the Vice Sect Master give young Master Dongfang 2 Earth Desolate pills? He actually didn't use them during this time and went to cultivate a new King Class domain. He's really neglecting the essentials. What a waste. He doesn't know how to cherish things. Uncle Dan had a pained expression. He originally thought that Yi Fei hadn't appeared so late because he was busy breaking through to the Earth Gray domain. Who knew that Yi Fei would waste so much time and cultivate a King Class domain? Uncle Dan didn't know what to say. He could only hurriedly point to the pill cauldron battle. He found an excuse to go to the side and hurriedly reported this matter to Dan Ling through the sound transmission mirror. Uncle Dan, what are you saying? Yi Fei hasn't broken through to the Earth Gray domain in so many days. Instead, he went to cultivate a new King Class domain. What is he thinking? Does he really think that I gave him the Earth Desolate pills for free? Dan Ling was also angry. She had been so generous back then that she had given 2 Earth Desolate pills at once. Firstly, she wanted to rope in Yi Fei. Secondly, she hoped that Yi Fei could break through to the Earth Gray domain and become an Earth Grade quasi-emperor. Then, he could better serve the primary pill sect. Of course, it wasn't that Dan Ling hadn't considered that Yi Fei might have broken through to the Earth Grade domain and then cultivated a King Class domain. However, that was too exaggerated. After all, to break through to the Earth Gray domain and comprehend a new King Class domain in a short dozen days, even an absolute genius would find it very difficult to do so. This Dongfang, you didn't even enter the Starry Sky ranking. He can't be an absolute genius. At most, he's a peak genius who had some fortuitous encounters. Yet this person is so proud of himself and failed to live up to my expectations of him. I originally thought that since he had potential, I could suffer a little and marry him. In my opinion, this person isn't worthy of me entrusting myself to him. Dan Ling shook her head. She was already starting to feel disappointed with Yi Fei. Even the Sky Spear Elder smiled bitterly. He didn't understand what Yi Fei was thinking. He clearly had the opportunity to break through to the Earth Grade domain. Instead of cherishing it, he went to cultivate a king-class domain. Of course, if Dan Ling, and the Sky Spear Elder knew that Yi Fei had already become a heaven-grade quasi-emperor, he could understand Yi Fei's actions now. Unfortunately, it was useless to explain. In order not to expose his identity, Yi Fei could not explain himself. The only thing he could do was to rush to the main battlefield of the Pill Cauldron battle. He would be able to return Dan Ling's favor if he won. Of course, he would also be able to obtain a heaven-desolate pill. Even if it's for this Tian Huang pill, I must win. Quasi-emperors were very fast. The dragon tortoise carried Yi Fei and crossed half of Danding City in a few dozen breaths, arriving at a huge drill ground in the city. Hundreds of thousands of martial artists had already gathered around the martial arts practice field. From weak martial masters to powerful quasi-emperors, they were all gathered around to watch the once-in-a-century battle of the Elixir Cauldron. There was also a huge floating meteor in the middle of the drill ground. At the same time, it had been polished flat, forming a special arena that could withstand the attacks of quasi-emperors and quasi-emperors. Clearly, this kind of arena was specially prepared for quasi-emperors to battle. At this moment, countless martial artists surrounded this arena and discussed it. Who do you think will win this time? Is there even a need to ask? It will definitely be the Heavy Cauldron sect. The last time the primary Pill sect won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Even their sect master died in battle. However, the Heavy Cauldron sect has developed very quickly in the past 100 years and recruited many quasi-emperor experts. That might not be the case. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. The primary Pill sect also has many guest elder experts. The Heavenly Spear Old Man has been famous for a long time. The white-haired ancestor is a giant of the demonic Tao. Haha! The latest news is that the white-haired ancestor already left the primary Pill sect and joined the Heavy Cauldron sect. This time, the white-haired ancestor will represent the Heavy Cauldron sect in battle. There is such a thing? That is interesting. Look, the white-haired ancestor is indeed on the Heavy Cauldron sect side. As Dan Yuanzi led a large group of guest elders over, the Heavy Cauldron sect master, Lord Ma, also led Ma Tai, the fourth elder, and many other guest elders over aggressively. What shocked many people was that the white-haired ancestor, who used to be the second guest elder expert of the primary Pill sect, actually appeared in the Heavy Cauldron sect's group. Many martial artists were in an uproar. Many guest elders of the primary Pill sect were furious on the spot. White-haired ancestor, you will die a horrible death. You traitor, how did the primary Pill sect wrong you? Why do you have to be so ruthless? Dan Yuanzi and Dan Ling were even more furious. A cold, murderous intent flashed in the eyes of the Heavenly Spear Old Man, which made the white-haired ancestor's heart skip a beat. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the Heavy Cauldron sect's group. Only those who know how to adapt to circumstances can live better and longer. The white-haired ancestor has turned over a new leaf. This is a good thing that is worth encouraging. The white-haired ancestor was overjoyed when he heard this. Just this sentence alone made him so excited that his whole body trembled. His face also regained his confidence and the ferocity of a giant of the demonic Tao. Dan Ling, you forced me to do this. You don't know what's good for you. You forced me to leave the primary Pill sect for your gigolo. Today, I am joining the Heavy Cauldron sect to seek justice. Secondly, I want everyone to see the true face of you, Dan Ling, who is obsessed with beauty and unable to distinguish between loyalty and treachery. The white-haired ancestor scolded very straightforwardly. Many martial artists who heard this collectively went into an uproar. What? Dan Ling actually kept a gigolo and did not hesitate to force the white-haired ancestor, a quasi-emperor expert, to leave? In this case, the white-haired ancestor's betrayal is pardonable. Damn it. What's the name of that gigolo? Come out if you have the guts. I will kill him and return my goddess. Countless young martial artists were angry and clamoring. They beat their chests and stamped their feet as if they wanted to tear Yi Fei into pieces. Even many of the primary pill sect's guests were gnashing their teeth and immediately reported. That person is called Dongfang Yu. He is a despicable and cowardly demon. Demon Dongfang, you'll die a horrible death. Demon Dongfang, come out. I, the white-haired ancestor, want to fight with you. The white-haired ancestor roared loudly. He did not forget the humiliation of being forced to leave by the Sky Spear Elder a few days ago. The white-haired ancestor was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Since Yi Fei had offended him and caused him to lose the opportunity to force Dan Ling, or to give him the desolate heaven elixir in advance, he would kill the person Dan Ling, or liked in front of everyone, and let Dan Ling suffer. Bang! Hearing this, Dan Yuanzi was so angry that he erupted with the aura of a heaven quasi-emperor on the spot. He shattered the chair he was sitting on into stone powder. Only then did he suppress the dissatisfied voices of the crowd. He glared at Dan Ling and scolded, I really don't know what you like about that demon. Father, it's not what you think. You misunderstood me. Dan Ling, face was so red that it could drip blood. She was so depressed that she wanted to vomit blood. Misunderstood? Dan Ling, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and call your lover out. I will kill him today. The white-haired ancestor pressed further. He seemed to have boundless courage. He actually provoked the entire primary pill sect. Dan Ling was so angry that her whole body trembled. She could not help but stomp her feet in annoyance. Why hasn't Dongfang Yu arrived yet? Is he really afraid of fighting? Last Dan, don't worry. Others might be afraid of fighting, but this young master Dongfang definitely won't. Look, he's here. The Sky Spear Elder pointed to the distant sky. There was a huge black tortoise on top of it. It was carrying Yi Fei as it descended towards the arena. When the dragon tortoise landed, the entire meteorite arena that was floating in the air sank down 3 meters with a bang. Chapter 1643. You're the pretty boy that Dan May has a crush on. The patriarch has been waiting for you for a long time. The white-haired patriarch didn't recognize Yi Fei, but he recognized the fat black tortoise beside Yi Fei. He immediately flew into a rage. At the same time, the glutton with a big belly, Ma Tai, also flew into a rage. When he saw the dragon tortoise appear again, Ma Tai's eyes glowed like a wolf's. He roared at his father, Lord Ma. Father, it's him. It's him. Even if he turned into ashes, I would still recognize him. Not only did he steal my son's ambition, not only did he steal our son's dragon tortoise, but he also almost killed our son. The Heavy Cauldron sect definitely won't let him off. Son, don't worry. No one can bully you, and you can still live in this world. White-haired old ancestor, kill him and bring that dragon turtle back to me. Lord Ma's voice was filled with killing intent, and he directly ordered the white-haired old ancestor to kill him. Yi Fei was instantly enraged. When he had arrived, he had heard the white-haired patriarch spreading rumors and slandering him. Now, he had heard Ma Tai distorting the truth. As the sect master of the Heavy Cauldron sect, Lord Ma had even shouted at him to kill him. Even a clay figurine would have a temper. Yi Fei's character had always been one that didn't offend others unless they offended him. Since you've offended me, don't blame me for being ruthless. White-haired patriarch, didn't you want to challenge me? Come up here and let's fight. Yi Fei stood on the platform with his hands clasped behind his back as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. This glint made the white-haired patriarch feel as though he had been targeted by a ferocious beast. His heart skipped a beat before he flew into a rage. Damn it! When the patriarch was roaming the galaxy, you were still playing with mud on land. Now, the patriarch wants the primary elixir sect to see how great of a loss it is to lose the patriarch. Boom! The white-haired patriarch instantly jumped onto the meteorite arena as well. Demonic energy and killing intent quickly emerged from his body, forming a bloody hurricane that viciously crushed towards Yi Fei. The white-haired old ancestor was very confident. After all, he was an Earth-grade quasi-emperor who had been famous for more than 70 years. Whether it was in terms of combat strength or experience, he undoubtedly stood at the peak of the Earth grade. Brat, it's not too late to kneel and beg for mercy now. Even so, I can end you within 10 moves. What? He killed the demon of the East within 10 moves? Could it be that the white-haired old ancestor obtained some incredible benefits from the Heavy Cauldron sect? The alchemy sect's guest delegates were all startled. Apart from the Sky Spear Elder, the other guest delegates truly did not have much confidence in Yifei. Dan Yuanzi was even more dissatisfied as he scolded, "Daughter, even if you want to find a man, can't you find a slightly more decent one? Look at him. What kind of person is he? Not only is he afraid of fighting, but he's also arrogant. What's so bad about him that he dares to provoke a senior expert like the white-hair ancestor? Did he obtain the agreement of our primary elixir sect? No, this fight does not count. My primary elixir sect absolutely will not admit to it." Dan Yuanzi also charged into the arena in rage. He was already dissatisfied with Yifei in the first place. Now, he could not tolerate Yifei taking the initiative to fight. This was because the Pill Cauldron battle was too important to the primary elixir sect. If Yifei lost the first round and got killed, it would definitely affect the primary elixir sect's morale. It would be an extremely severe blow. Hence, before Yifei and the white-haired old ancestor fought, Dan Yuanzi did not hold back. He burst out with his heavenly quasi-emperor aura and sent it at Yifei, hoping to knock Yifei out of the arena and end this farce that should not have happened. Ma Wanya immediately guffawed. At this moment, he also burst out with his heavenly quasi-emperor cultivation. However, he did not send his aura at Yifei, but at Dan Yuanzi. Rumble. The auras of two heavenly quasi-emperors clashed before the fight between Yifei and the white-haired old ancestor started. Originally, a battle between heavenly quasi-emperors was very terrifying. However, neither Ma Wanya nor Dan Yuanzi were quasi-emperors who were good at fighting. Although their auras clashed, they only kicked up a faint ripple in the air. However, this was already sufficient for Ma Wanya. The instant Ma Wanya blocked Dan Yuanzi, he said sullenly, "The battle of the Pill Cauldrons has already started once they entered the arena. Dan Yuanzi, are you trying to break the rules?" "No way. This Dongfang Yu's origins and strength are unknown. As long as this old man does not agree, he will not be an official guest elder of my primary Pill sect. He will not be able to represent my primary Pill sect in battle." Anger filled Dan Yuanzi's face. When he saw Ma Wanya blocking him, he immediately turned his head and shouted at Dan Ling, "Girl, why are you still not letting him come down? Do you really want to see the 10,000-year-old foundation of our primary Pill sect destroyed at the hands of this pretty boy you raised?" "Me? Pretty boy?" When Yifei heard this, his face turned dark. He even suddenly glanced at Dan Ling. The instant Yifei turned his head, the white-haired old ancestor's eyes suddenly flared with a ferocious light. He immediately took advantage of the moment Yifei was distracted. The old ancestor's head of white hair suddenly started to grow wildly like grass. 30,000 zhong white hair, gods and demons are heartbroken. The white hair fluttered in the air like silver threads, like a white waterfall, piercing through the void and strangling everything. This was the white-hair demonic art. At the same time, it was also an evil art. When cultivated to a high level, apart from the head, the entire body would turn white. This hair could be used to kill, defend, and plunder. There was no end to it, no end to it, no end to it. It was because of this evil art that the white-haired old ancestor had dominated Danding City for more than 70 years. He had rarely met a worthy opponent. When Danlinger saw that Yifei was still distracted by such a terrifying demonic art and was still talking to her, her expression turned extremely ugly. She couldn't help but cry out, "Be careful. Small matter. Instead of cultivating as a human, you chose to cultivate into a monster that is neither human nor ghost. To be honest, white-haired old ancestor, you disappoint me." Yifei didn't turn his head. He didn't even look at the endless white hair entangling him. A low growl came from his throat. His entire body was already blooming with dazzling golden light like a star. Not only did it prevent the white hair from getting closer, but the demonic power of the golden light also made the white-haired old ancestor, who also cultivated demonic arts, feel a chill. His heart skipped a beat. What kind of body-tempering demonic art is that? He actually blocked my 30,000 young white hair with just his physical body. The white-haired old ancestor felt an inexplicable sense of fear. It should be known that his white hair had been cultivated to the point where it was as hard as steel and as soft as cotton. When the countless strands of white hair were combined, he could even easily shatter a meteorite. However, he was unable to pierce through Yi Fei's golden godlike body. The white-haired old ancestor was instantly terrified. Then, he became even more furious. Chapter 1644. For some reason, Dan Ling's heartbeat sped up when she saw that Yi Fei was able to remain calm in the face of the white-haired ancestor's frenzied attacks. She blushed slightly, but that only lasted for an instant. Once Dan Ling discovered Yi Fei's hidden, shocking combat prowess, her strong woman side made her put on a stern expression and coldly spit out a single word. "Kill, as you wish, Vice Sectmaster." Yi Fei nodded solemnly and bowed to Dan Ling as a guest elder. This way, when he won the Pill Cauldron battle, the Origin Core sect wouldn't be able to deny the Sky Desolate Pill that belonged to him. Of course, since Dan Ling had acknowledged him as a guest elder, it was time for him to work hard. Eastern Devil, prepare to die. When the medicinal power of these pills flowed into his primordial spirit, the white-haired forefather's entire body miraculously transformed into a strange ball of white hair. In the center of the ball was the white-haired forefather's malevolent face. Around the ball were endless strands of white hair. These white hairs were like steel needles, like a torrential downpour. They pierced through the void and threaded through the threads. At this moment, the white-haired devil art was no longer 3,000 feet long. Instead, it had reached 300,000 feet long. As far as the eye could see, the entire arena was surrounded by white hairs. It's over. Dan Yuanzi had been facing off against Ma Wangya. When he saw the endless strands of white hair surround the arena and completely drown Yi Fei, he almost fainted from anger. The Origin Core sect has been completely destroyed by this kid. When he dies, the other guest elders will surely be suppressed. The Origin Core sect can only win the next 2 battles. We can't afford to lose. How could this be? Dan Ling was also momentarily dazed. She hadn't expected that Yi Fei, who had been talking to her just a moment ago, would be completely submerged in white hair in the next. She suddenly felt a sense of loss and sadness. Heavenly Elder, if you act now, can you still save him? I'm afraid it's too late. The white-haired old ancestor hit a trump card. His current offensive prowess has already broken through the limits of the Earth rank. He is probably already comparable to an ordinary heaven rank quasi-emperor. Even this old man can only avoid his attack and not face it head-on. Little friend Dongfang's body tempering cultivation technique is extremely rare. But I'm afraid, boom, the entire arena suddenly began to shake violently. Originally, the entire stage had turned into a ball of white hair. However, right at this moment, threads of incomparably resplendent golden light suddenly erupted from the gaps of the ball of hair. Then, this golden light ferociously turned into golden flames. Xiao, 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 xiao. The white-haired old ancestor's entire body of white hair trembled violently at this moment. He suddenly went crazy. Not only did he consume a large number of medicinal pills, but he also burned a trace of demonic blood in his body, causing his white hair to erupt with a layer of silver light. Soon, it turned into a ball of silver light. Then, the terrifying ball of silver light continuously pressed down on the arena. The horrifying pressure continuously pressed down on the meteorite arena, causing it to creak, unable to bear the burden. This made many of the core sects and heavy cauldron sects guest elders' expressions turn extremely unsightly and fearful. The horrifying pressure and the all-pervasive white-haired demonic cultivation technique would kill even an Earth-rank quasi-emperor if he got surrounded by the white hair. Now, not only could that continental cultivator, that demon Dongfang, still resist, but he was also slowly walking out of the encirclement of the boundless white hair like a golden demonic god. The white hair demonic cultivation technique is only SOSO, not to mention cultivating your body into white hair. Even if you cultivate your primordial spirit into white hair, you will not be able to stop me. In the end, what you cultivate is just a crooked cultivation technique. Mine is a proper martial technique. Take my punch. Boom! Yifei stood in the middle of the boundless white hair and threw out a punch. This punch was a life and death boxing technique. However, the power he activated was not the power of yin and yang, but the even more horrifying power of despair. This kind of power could shatter the starry sky and destroy everything. The horrifying physical body of the battle demon path and the powerful primordial spirit of the battle god path combined. When these two kinds of power erupted, the surrounding white hair was completely destroyed in an instant. Then, the crowd saw an incomparably resplendent purple-gold fist light that was as bright as a star, piercing their eyes. It shocked their minds. No, what kind of power is that? It actually, before the white-haired ancestor could finish his words, his head that was wrapped in hair suddenly exploded. The primordial spirit that escaped from his head had a look of deep despair and fear on its face. It struggled with difficulty for one more second. Immediately after, the white-haired ancestor's primordial spirit also exploded, shattering into a terrifying stream of light. That was the last of the white-haired ancestor's white hair. It scattered and fell to the ground like heavy iron and stone, shattering into a silver stream of light. And in the sky above the endless white hair, Yifei slowly retracted his fist. The dazzling purple-gold light on his body had already disappeared. Yifei still looked the same as before. He was dressed in an ordinary black purple-gold robe. He looked ordinary, and no one could feel any power or pressure from him. But this time, Yifei was standing in the arena like an ordinary person. In the eyes of many warriors, Yifei's figure had become incomparably tall and imposing. He actually killed the white-haired ancestor with a single punch. Ma Tai swallowed hard. No matter how much he wanted to eat the dragon turtle, Ma Tai could feel that behind Yifei's ordinary appearance, there was a great terror hidden. This kid, how is he a pretty boy raised by a woman? He is clearly a hidden super tiger. Dan Yuanzi's face was burning. He was excited and ashamed at the same time. At the beginning, he was still worried that Yifei was not strong enough. It was fine if he went up to court death, but it was also very likely that the morale of the army would be shaken and the primary elixir sect would be humiliated. But this time, Dan Yuanzi was proud and complacent. This kid is very good, very good. However, this old man will not object to your marriage. Hurry up and get married next month. Dan Ling did not react. It was not that she did not want to react, but the combat strength that Yifei had displayed at this time had deeply shocked her. She was unable to recover her senses for a long time. The Sky Spear elder lost his composure and dropped his fishing rod on the ground. The silence lasted for more than 10 breaths of time. Then, the guests of the primary elixir sect who had come to their senses cheered wildly, and the guests of the heavy cauldron sect gasped. I didn't expect this demon called Dongfang Yu to have such terrifying strength. He actually killed the white-haired ancestor with a single punch. No wonder Dan Ling took a fancy to him. Gosh, such a person is definitely not a nobody. Given his strength, it should be possible for him to enter the Starry Sky battle list. Why isn't his name on it? Chapter 1645. An Earth-grade quasi-emperor. A physical body comparable to a semi-divine weapon. This was the evaluation of Yifei's combat prowess by many martialists, even though his combat prowess could not reach the level of the top 5 on the Star Combat list. However, There was no doubt that Yi Fei's strength was very close to the star combat list. If these people knew that what Yi Fei had displayed was not his true strength, they would definitely be even more shocked. But even so, Yi Fei's performance could only be described as astonishing. At this moment, even if he was just standing there, he was still so dazzling that no one could ignore him. Then, the sect master of the Heavy Cauldron sect, Lord Ma, roared furiously. Dan Yuanzi, it turns out that you were just acting. You were actually hiding such a young expert. Ha ha ha. If this old man wasn't acting, would you have been fooled? To tell you the truth, this old man has long taken a liking to our young friend Dongfang. It's just that most people don't know about it. Dan Yuanzi was also a shrewd person. After seeing Yi Fei's strength clearly, he immediately changed his attitude and started to rope in Yi Fei. Yi Fei was speechless, but he could not say anything. After all, he did not have a deep relationship with the primary elixir sect. The only reason he had come to participate in the alchemy battle was to obtain the Sky Desolate elixir. Who's next? Yi Fei did not walk down from the stage. He had decided to help the primary elixir sect achieve victory in one go so that he could obtain the Sky Desolate elixir. If Yi Fei had dared to do this at the beginning, Dan Yuanzi would have been furious on the spot. Even the other guests of the primary elixir sect would have been dissatisfied. They would have thought that Yi Fei was too arrogant and condescending. However, after hearing Yi Fei's words and sensing the powerful aura on Yi Fei's body, Dan Yuanzi's eyes were filled with admiration. Many of the guests of the primary elixir sect, including the Sky Spear Elder, were convinced. In the world of martial arts, the strong were respected. Yi Fei's strength was strong enough to win the respect of others. Young Master Dongfang, do your best. The primary elixir sect will win. Many foreign dignitaries shouted excitedly. Compared to the excitement of the Danyuan sect, the foreign dignitaries of the Heavy Cauldron sect were pale. Lord Ma's expression was extremely ugly. However, he quickly thought of something and couldn't help but reveal a cold and sinister smile. Do you really think that you are invincible just because your physical body is comparable to a semi-divine artifact? My Heavy Cauldron sect doesn't lack semi-divine artifacts. Dan Yuanzi, you forced me to do this. Take out the demigod armor. Seventh Elder, we'll have to rely on you this time. Well said. Since I become the Heavy Cauldron sect's foreign dignitary, I'll naturally serve the sect master. This brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, I will personally kill him on behalf of the sect master. A scrawny old man with a gloomy expression walked out of the crowd. He was wearing a special armor. This armor flickered with a peculiar cold light and exuded the unique suppressive aura of a semi-divine artifact. Dan Ling suddenly woke up and immediately transmitted a message to Yi Fei. Be careful, young Master Dongfang. That seventh elder is the strongest foreign dignitaries of the Heavy Cauldron sect. His footwork is very strange. Back then, my grandfather was ambushed by him and died from serious injuries. Dan Yuanzi's expression turned ugly when he saw Lord Ma send out the strongest foreign dignitaries and let the seventh elder wear a semi-divine artifact armor. After all, in his opinion, Yi Fei's strongest point was his physical body. The seventh elder was wearing a semi-divine artifact set to fight. It was obvious that he was prepared to deal with Yi Fei's physical body. Damn it, Dan Yuanzi was furious. He immediately threw an elixir that exuded an astonishing amount of spiritual energy to Yi Fei. Little friend Dongfang, take this elixir quickly. It can double your combat strength for a short time. A figure caught the elixir with a whoosh. However, it wasn't Yi Fei. It was the seventh elder. He silently tore through the void, grabbed the elixir, and swallowed it in one gulp. Ha ha ha. I've long heard about the miraculous effects of the Danyuan sect's burst spirit pill. Today, I won't stand on ceremony. I'll taste it. As he spoke, the seventh elder completely refined the burst spirit pill in a few breaths. His aura instantly doubled. Then, without waiting for Dan Yuanzi to react, he threw a second burst spirit pill to Yi Fei. Suddenly, the seventh elder disappeared from the void and reappeared abruptly. He was less than 3 meters behind Yi Fei. Dan Yuanzi's expression turned even uglier. Clearly, he hadn't expected that the seventh elder would snatch the elixir he had thrown out and use it to increase his strength again. Danling, Er's heart clenched as she watched Yi Fei nervously. Yi Fei was slightly surprised by the seventh elder's sudden move. You used an incomplete void step. Are you from the Shang clan or the trade union? You actually know about the Shang clan? Then you deserve to die. Shock and panic flashed across the seventh elder's face when he heard Yi Fei mention the Shang clan. However, his expression quickly became even more sinister. The moment he appeared behind Yi Fei, a wave of pressure suddenly appeared on his body. This was the great void palm that Shangluo had used before. However, compared to Shangluo's void palm, the seventh elder's void palm was just the tip of the iceberg. Combined with the panic that had flashed through the seventh elder's heart when he'd heard him mention the Shang clan, Yi Fei vaguely understood something. You aren't from the Shang clan. You must have secretly learned the void step and void palm through some means. Yi Fei didn't even look at the seventh elder. He allowed the void palm to land on him. At the same time, Yi Fei's eyes were still on Danling as he asked, Vice Sectmaster, should we kill or spare this person? Kill him. Danling felt Yi Fei's shock and her heart calmed down for some reason. As you wish. Yi Fei nodded and didn't say anything else. Instead, he suddenly turned around. Sword chi surged from his body like raging waves and rivers. The Taiji 4-phase swords suddenly slashed out. A terrifying Taiji sword formation suddenly appeared in the void. In the center of the formation was a dazzling Taiji. The Azure Dragon Divine Sword, White Tiger Divine Sword, Vermilion Bird Divine Sword, and Black Tortoise Divine Sword were suppressed on all 4 sides of the Taiji. There was a loud boom. The light of the Taiji drowned the entire arena. The 4-phase swords slashed out at the same time, turning the entire area into a slaughterhouse of swordlight. The seventh elder's expression changed drastically as he sensed a strong sense of imminent death. He didn't even have time to use the void palm. The seventh elder roared and tried to escape into the void. He wanted to use the void step to avoid Yi Fei's terrifying swordlight. Unfortunately, Yi Fei's entire body did the same the moment the seventh elder escaped into the void. He took a step forward and arrived in front of the seventh elder. Then, the dazzling Taiji, along with the 4-phase swords, pierced through the seventh elder's body and primordial spirit. You are. The seventh elder's eyes widened in shock and fear. Chapter 1646. Yi Fei's sword was clean and efficient. Even though the seventh elder was protected by a set of semi-divine tools, the Taiji 4-phase sword easily pierced through him. Yi Fei had refined the Earth Desolate elixir and raised his Taiji domain and Azure Dragon domain to Earth-grade domains. At the same time, he had also comprehended the Vermilion Bird domain. Domains had a very obvious effect on the power of martial techniques. The stronger the domain, the greater the improvement in martial techniques. Even though the seventh elder was wearing a set of semi-divine tools, as long as his combat strength was not as good as Yi Fei's, he would still be killed in one strike. At the same time, Yi Fei had also seized the seventh elder's spatial belt. Yi Fei didn't care that he was still in the arena and started flipping through it. He was really too curious about how the seventh elder had learned the void technique. Yi Fei's actions caused a huge shock in the eyes of the crowd. Dan Yuanzi, the vice sectmaster, was so excited that he was incoherent. Our primary elixir faction has won. Our primary elixir faction has won the elixir cauldron battle. Long live the sect master. Long live young Master Dongfa. Long live the primary elixir faction. The Sky Spear Elder and the other guests cheered excitedly. Once the primary elixir faction won, they would once again control the Desolate Elixir and refine the Heaven Desolate Elixir. Then these guests would have a chance to break through to the Heaven-grade Quasi-Emperor someday in the future. How could they not be excited? Danling looked at Yi Fei with sparkling eyes. She admitted that she had misjudged him previously. However, there was still a chance to make up for it. Dan Ling had already decided that even if she had to use force, she would definitely keep Yi Fei in the primary elixir faction and by her side. Thinking of this, Dan Ling Er's face inexplicably revealed a trace of shyness as she looked at Yi Fei. However, she saw that Yi Fei was only looking at the spatial belt in his hand. Dan Ling immediately felt incomparably depressed, wondering if she had become ugly. Could it be that her charm couldn't compare to the charm of a spatial belt? Compared to the primary elixir faction's cheers, the heavy cauldron faction side, from Ma Tai to the guests, all had ugly expressions. One had to know that the pill cauldron battle was a best-of-3 competition. Now, the battle had just begun, and Yi Fei had instantly killed 2 great experts from the heavy cauldron sect, obtaining 2 victories. Who would have thought that this warrior from the land called Dongfang not only has a body comparable to a quasi-divine weapon, but his martial arts are also so terrifying. 2 Earth-level domain masters, 1 King-level domain master, and that terrifying sword formation. Even a quasi-relic armor couldn't withstand it. Who among us can fight? Who dares to fight? Who would have thought that the Danyuan faction would win the Battle of the Elixir Cauldron so easily, and that the Heavy Cauldron sect would lose so miserably? Ma Tai looked at Yi Fei in fear, then looked at the Core sect's guest elders who were cheering. With red eyes, he roared unwillingly, "How can my Heavy Cauldron sect lose? We will definitely not lose." Sun well said. Our Heavy Cauldron sect will definitely not lose. Even if we fail, we must turn defeat into victory. This old man believes that my Heavy Cauldron sect will definitely obtain the final victory. Ma Wangya's face was ashen, but he did not lose his confidence. He stood up again, stirring the hearts of the people. Following his words, the 4th elder, who rarely had a high combat strength, stood up firmly and said gloomily, "Danyuan faction, don't be too complacent. The Battle of the Elixir Cauldron is not over yet. You have not obtained the final victory." The Core sect's guest elders' cheers paused. Dan Yuanzi's face turned ugly on the spot, and he said angrily, "Heavy Cauldron sect, what do you mean? Could it be that you can't afford to lose and want to renege? Renege? You, Dan Yuanzi, are only slightly better at refining elixirs. You are nothing. You can't even be a sect leader. You can only be a deputy sect leader with your daughter. Why do you have to talk to this old man?" Ma Wangya threw caution to the wind and pointed at the arena coldly. Then he faced the hundreds of thousands of martial artists around. "Elders, watch carefully. The Battle of the Elixir Cauldron is a best-of-3 competition. Even if the Danyuan faction wins 2 rounds, as long as we can turn the tables in the final round and win 3 rounds consecutively, even if my Heavy Cauldron sect violates the rules, the winner of this Battle of the Elixir Cauldron will definitely belong to us. Yes, it belongs to us. The Heavy Cauldron sect will definitely win." Among the crowd, some of the martial artists who supported the Heavy Cauldron sect also helped to shout. Dan Yuanzi was even more furious at this. However, when he thought of Yi Fei's valiant strength, Dan Yuanzi immediately snorted and said, "Let's fight then. Which other guest elder among you dares to go up and court death?" The faces of the Heavy Cauldron sect's guest elders changed at the same time. Many of the more timid ones couldn't help but take a step back. Even though Yi Fei didn't do anything, the fact that he killed the white-haired ancestor and the 7th elder in an instant was enough to make all the Heavy Cauldron sect's guest elders gasp. The strength of a single person intimidated the crowd. Staring at Yi Fei, Ma Wangya's ashen face became slightly distorted. Then, he took a deep breath and returned to normal. Suddenly, he took a step back and cupped his hands respectfully to a mysterious man wearing a bamboo hat among the guest elders. "Young master, please make a move and wash away the humiliation of my Heavy Cauldron sect. From now on, my Heavy Cauldron sect is willing to listen to young master's orders." "Hold on, Ma Wangya. The Battle of the Elixir Cauldron is an internal conflict between our 2 sections. You are obviously breaking the rules set by the old ancestor by letting an outsider interfere in this openly. Even though Dan Yuanzi was obsessed with refining elixirs and rarely got involved in worldly affairs, he instinctively felt that something was wrong when he saw Ma Wangye's respectful attitude. All right, he immediately spoke up to stop him. Hearing this, Ma Wangye spat on the ground disdainfully and scolded in a deep voice, pedantic. How many years has it been since the old ancestor died? Even the entire sect has been divided. What's the use of the rules that he set tens of thousands of years ago now? In our starry sky, ancient road, strength speaks for itself. So what if the Heavy Cauldron sect has the strength to destroy your elixir essence sect? Or do you think that you can go against the Wuji sect and young Master Wuji by roping in a terrestrial genius? Now that things had come to this, Ma Wangye didn't hide anymore and directly revealed his final trump card. His trump card was the Wuji sect. His words shocked all the martialists present. Then, almost all of them turned to look at the young man in the bamboo hat beside Lord Ma. Knowing that he could no longer hide his identity, the youth helplessly removed his conical bamboo hat, revealing a pair of bright and sharp eyes that looked like stars. With just one indifferent glance at the crowd, even many of the Earth-grade quasi-emperors could not help feeling a great fear and reverence in their hearts. Heaven-grade quasi-emperor, the top expert of the starry sky ranking, Gan Wuji. Greetings, young Master Wuji. Chapter 1647. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Heavy Cauldron sect and the Danyuan sect used to be the same sect, the Danyuan sect. As the name implied, this sect was famous for its powerful alchemy and weapon refinement skills. It even had the strength to contend with the Wuji sect. But later, a demigod master suddenly appeared in the Wuji sect and crushed the entire planet. Empty. That demigod had single-handedly weakened the Origin Pill sect and used his strength to pull away a large number of the Origin Pill sect's top experts. In the end, he had forced the Origin Pill sect to split into the Origin Pill sect and the Heavy Cauldron sect. To the Origin Pill sect and the Heavy Cauldron sect, the Everlasting sect was their mortal enemy. Even if the sect masters of the two sects couldn't contend against the Everlasting sect, they would still refuse to cooperate. Now, the Heavy Cauldron sect's Lord Ma had forgotten his deep hatred and publicly joined the Everlasting sect. He even wanted to submit to Qian Wuji. This immediately made Dan Yuanzi, who was in despair, fly into a rage. Lord Ma, you traitor, sinner, how can you do this to the Origin Pill sect? Sect masters of the Heavy Cauldron sect, how can you do this to our ancestors who used their lives to preserve our foundation? Facing Dan Yuanzi's accusation, Lord Ma's face showed a trace of shame. However, when he thought about the conditions Gan Wuji had promised him, his shame quickly turned into anger and coldness. He said indifferently, "You can say whatever you want. It's not the ancient era anymore. Our two sects aren't the Pill Cauldron School anymore. That's right, those old bastards did contribute a lot to our survival. But so what? They still died in the end. Our Pill Cauldron School is still divided into a bunch of stubborn old bastards. If I were in their shoes, I wouldn't have done anything. If I were a sect master, I wouldn't oppose the Everlasting sect. I would submit to the Everlasting sect and listen to their orders. We would conquer the universe and seize the martial heaven continent. Yes, conquer the universe and seize the martial heaven continent. We're willing to die for the Everlasting sect." The fourth elder wasn't willing to fall behind. He also raised his arm and shouted, expressing his loyalty. Many elders and guest elders of the Heavy Cauldron sect also shouted excitedly. In the end, compared to the Heavy Cauldron sect, joining a hegemon like the Everlasting sect would definitely bring them more benefits. Gan Wuji's eyes flashed like stars. While he was exerting pressure on the members of the primary Pill sect, his voice was filled with sincerity. Danyuan sect, I know. Back then, the Limitless Sword sect did cause a lot of harm to your Danding city, but that was ancient times. Now, the Limitless sect is different from the Limitless Sword sect. We are stronger, and our way of doing things is gentler. if Dan Yuan's sect is willing to join our limitless sect. I can consider letting Senior Dan Yuanzi take charge of the Everlasting Sect's Elixir Hall. Boom! Many cultivators were shocked by Gan Wuji's words. They were surprised by the Everlasting Sect's promise. Only Dan Yuanzi knew that the alchemy skills of the Everlasting Sect's Medicine Hall were actually lower than the Dan Origin sect's. Moreover, as an ancient sect, Dan Yuanzi was more interested in the inheritance than the benefits. Even though Gan Wuji's promise was very tempting, Dan Yuanzi refused without thinking. I'm sorry, our Dan Yuan sect is different from a traitor like Lord Ma. The Dan Yuan sect and Danding City were both passed down by our ancestors. We have an obligation and a responsibility to bring them to greater heights. Dan Yuanzi, what kind of bullshit are you spouting? If you want to bring the Dan Yuan sect to greater heights, then do you think I don't want to bring the Heavy Cauldron sect to greater heights? Young Master Wuji has already promised that as long as we join the Everlasting Sect, we can make our own decisions for the Elixir Hall and the Refining Hall. Continue our inheritance. Ma Wangye couldn't keep his face any longer. He was selling out his ancestors for glory. He could do such a thing, but he couldn't tolerate it if it was said out loud. Hearing this, Dan Ling couldn't help but mock. So you're saying that you're compromising. You've given away all your belongings and lost your ancestors' inheritance, and you still have the nerve to talk about bringing it to greater heights? Since you want to merge, do you dare let the Everlasting Sect's Refining Hall join your Heavy Cauldron sect? Do you dare? Bitch, shut your mouth. I'm talking to your father. Why do you have to interrupt? You don't deserve to talk to me. Lord Ma was ashamed and angry. Dan Ling tore apart his hypocritical heart with just a few words. Ma Wangye couldn't tolerate this at all. He immediately stopped arguing about this topic. Instead, he suddenly revealed a ferocious expression and fiercely threatened. Elders of the Dan Yuan sect, listen carefully. Offending the Everlasting Sect won't do anyone any good. On the contrary, joining the Everlasting Sect will bring you many benefits. Now, who's willing? If you're willing to join the Everlasting Sect and follow young Master Wuji, then stand over here and join our Heavy Cauldron Sect's camp. What nonsense! Our ancestors' inheritance can't be broken. The Dan Yuan Sect Foundation can't be destroyed in our hands. Everyone, don't you agree? Dan Yuanzi was so angry that his body trembled. At this moment, he even raised his arm and shouted, trying to boost morale. If it was a moment ago, the crowd behind him would definitely have responded. However, at this moment, apart from Dan Linger, the Sky Spear Elder, and a few other old people, most of the young elders and guests looked very hesitant. At this moment, Dan Yuanzi's face turned deathly pale. Why aren't you saying anything? The Dan Yuan sect has nurtured and worshipped you for decades. We haven't done anything wrong to you. Now that the Dan Yuan sect is in trouble again, why aren't you saying anything? Old Qin, don't you support me? Dan Ling looked at an old man in green clothes among the guests. This old man ranked third among the guests. He was also the main force of the Pill Cauldron battle this time. He was also an old friend of Dan Yuanzi's for hundreds of years. However, Old Qin didn't look the slightest bit ashamed when he heard Dan Ling's words. He smiled indifferently and said, "That's right. The Dan Yuan sect has indeed helped me. However, I've also helped the Dan Yuan sect for hundreds of years. We don't owe you anything. Brother Dan Linger, I'm sorry. I can't oppose the Everlasting Sect and young Master Wuji. Yes, the Everlasting Sect is the overlord of the universe. Opposing the Everlasting Sect is suicide. We're just helping the Dan Yuan sect, not risking our lives. Young Master Wuji, I'm also willing to join the Everlasting Sect." Another guest hurriedly walked out of the crowd and knelt before Gan Wuji to show his allegiance. Of course, there were also some guests who saw that the Dan Yuan sect's momentum was gone. They wisely took off their guest robes and bowed to Dan Linger. Dan Yuanzi said goodbye. "Vice Sect Masters, I'm sorry. We can't oppose young Master Wuji. Goodbye." There are also some shameless people who acted as lobbyists and said righteously, "Vice Sect Masters, since the Dan Yuan sect is about to be finished, Why don't you kneel down and apologize to young Master Wuji and the Heavy Cauldron sect while you still have a bargaining chip? I believe you'll join the everlasting sect. You'll live a better life. That's right, Dan Yuanzi. Young Master Wuji is kind and generous. He tried peaceful means before resorting to force. That's why he proposed the terms of surrender during the Pill Cauldron battle. If you don't surrender now, the Dan Yuan sect's tens of thousands of years of history will be destroyed. Ha ha ha! Lord Ma laughed proudly. Gan Wuji had already promised him. Even if the Dan Yuan sect surrendered, Pill Cauldron City and the desolate mountain range would belong to the Heavy Cauldron sect forever. Not only would the Heavy Cauldron sect dominate Pill Cauldron City, but they would also control the refining hall of the everlasting sect. This was also why Lord Ma had made the decision to surrender to the everlasting sect. As he watched his old rival, the Core sect, fall apart, Lord Ma felt even more delighted deep down. Compared to Lord Ma's delight, Dan Yuanzi and Dan Ling, Er's faces were pale. They hadn't expected that the everlasting sect, which had only sent Gan Wuji, would cause the 36 guest elders they had painstakingly nurtured to fall apart. How could the Pill Cauldron battle continue like this? Who would dare attack the young master of the everlasting sect? Chapter 1648. Could it be that the heavens want us to die? Dan Yuanzi looked up to the sky and cried out in grief. Out of the 36 guest ministers, Gan Wuji had been defeated in an instant. They were once close friends, but after being slightly threatened by the Heavy Cauldron sect, they immediately turned against each other and left heartlessly. The remaining elders of the Core Elixir sect were also uneasy, and their faces were filled with fear. They were all very authoritative when it came to refining elixirs, but if they were asked to fight and resist at this moment, even if they wanted to, they couldn't. They were powerless. Of course, there were some who didn't give up. As a strong woman, Dan Ling looked weak, but her heart was strong. Even in the face of such a situation, Dan Ling heart calmed down after a moment of panic and fear. Father, the Dan Yuanzi sect isn't dead yet. We still have Elder Tian and the other elders. Most importantly, we still have him. Dan Ling suddenly pointed at the stage. At this moment, everyone's eyes suddenly realized that Gan Wuji had appeared and scared the 36 guests of the Dan Yuanzi sect into dispersing without a fight. Yi Fei didn't react at all. He was still on the stage, rummaging through the 7th Elder's spatial belt. After some searching, Yi Fei found something very interesting. It was a badge, very similar to the badge of the General Manager of the Merchant Alliance. There was also a shaman on it. There was also a line of information on the back of the badge. Sky Devil Merchant Alliance, 7th Deputy General Manager. Coincidentally, the person I killed was also called the 7th Elder. Could it be that this person was a deputy manager of the Shang clan in the Heavenly Devil Continent? Because he secretly learned the Great Void technique, he fled in fear of punishment and entered the ancient path of the starry sky to conceal his identity. Only then did he become the 7th Elder of the Heavy Cauldron sect. The Great Void technique is so bad. It's not as good as the Dragon Turtles. Yi Fei shook his head. Since he already knew the 7th Elder's identity, he didn't care. He was just a runaway slave of the Shang clan. The Shang clan probably wouldn't make things difficult for him. Then, Yi Fei felt countless gazes on him. He glanced at Dan Ling, in confusion. Deputy Sect Master, do you have any orders? Dan Ling was a bit surprised, then asked excitedly, You're not leaving? You're still willing to stay and fight for the Dan Yuanzi sect? Of course. Yi Fei's righteous words immediately made Dan Ling burst with joy. She subconsciously thought to herself, he really is doing this for me. Could it be that he's already liked me in his heart? Dan Ling, face turned slightly red, and she couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. Yi Fei felt that his explanation wasn't thorough enough, so he immediately added, If I don't fight, how can I ask you for the Heaven Desolate Elixir? Yi Fei felt that this was a very serious question. Hearing those words, Dan Ling's mood which had been in full bloom, immediately turned cold. She had the urge to point at Yi Fei and give him a good scolding. What? This land martial artist dares to make a move? Could it be that he still has some hidden cards that he dares to go against young Master Limitless? The hearts of the surrounding cultivators shook. Although Gan Wuji's appearance had caused the core sect's guest elders to crumble, Gan Wuji's prestige was unparalleled. However, no one dared to overlook Yi Fei. Although Yi Fei's radiance wasn't as dazzling as Gan Wuji's, many cultivators, especially the Heavy Cauldron sect, didn't dare to overlook him. Humph! You overestimate yourself. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to stand in front of young Master Limitless? You'd better kneel down and kowtow. Maybe I can ask young Master Limitless to spare your life. Ma Tai stood behind Gan Wuji, purposely using Gan Wuji's might to try and humiliate Yi Fei in front of everyone. However, a hand stopped Ma Tai. It was Gan Wuji. The core sect's guest elders are scared witless when they hear my name. Only he can remain unmoved. He is a talent. Gan Wuji, welcome talents, regardless of whether they come from the land or space. How about it? How about following me? I see that you also use a sword. Follow me. I can give you the Sky Desolate Elixir right now and guide your cultivation. Gan Wuji's expression was arrogant. He had actually noticed Yi Fei long ago. However, he had pretended not to see him because he had been busy threatening the core sect. Now that the core sect's guest elders had been utterly defeated, only Yi Fei remained unmoved. This made Gan Wuji a little unhappy. Thus, he purposely proposed a condition that no cultivator would accept. He wanted to test Yi Fei further. Dan Ling, and Dan Yuanzi were very nervous about Gan Wuji's test. Hearing this, Yi Fei was also stunned for a moment. While he sneered in his heart, a warm and simple smile appeared on his face. You're not bluffing, are you? You're giving me the Tian Huang elixir now, right? Humph. It's just a Sky Desolate elixir. The Wuji sect has plenty of it. A wise man submits to circumstances. Since you are willing to submit to me, I don't mind giving you a Sky Desolate elixir. Gan Wuji's smile was very warm and friendly. However, Lord Ma knew that Gan Wuji would only treat people who were inferior to him as slaves or servants. Only servants would show such a smile. In Gan Wuji's eyes, all servants and servants were a bunch of pitiful worms. He naturally didn't mind showing them a bit of kindness. In Gan Wuji's eyes, Yi Fei, who had lost his temper and bowed to him for a Sky Desolate elixir, was undoubtedly a pitiful worm. Although Gan Wuji was smiling, there was a deep disdain and mockery behind his smile. These so-called land geniuses are just SOSO. I really don't understand why Spirit Blood and Huoshao were so thoroughly defeated. It is a disgrace for me to be on the starry sky ranking with these land geniuses. A dark look flashed across Gan Wuji's eyes. Yi Fei didn't seem to notice the deep disdain behind Gan Wuji's smile. He didn't care about Dan Ling, and Dan Yuanzi's despairing eyes. He reached out his hand and said, I want to see the Sky Desolate elixir first. I want to make sure that you are not lying to me. How dare you? Who do you think young Master Wuji is? Lord Ma and Ma Tai were furious. They felt that Yi Fei was being too disrespectful to young Master Wuji. Yi Fei didn't say anything. He only looked at Gan Wuji and smiled like an honest person. Gan Wuji was quickly influenced. Even though he still had disdain in his eyes, he felt that Yi Fei was most likely sincerely submitting to him. Gan Wuji smiled and took out a bottle. He threw it over and said, Take this Tian Huang pill. Shua. All the quasi-emperors stared at the bottle. They wanted to rush over and snatch the Sky Desolate elixir. Dan Ling, and Dan Yuanzi were in despair. Their faces were ashen and their limbs were cold. This was what Gan Wuji wanted. As long as he defeated Yi Fei, the Dan Yuan faction would have no more fighting spirit. It was only a matter of time before they surrendered. Chapter 1649. What did you say? Do you dare to repeat what you just said? Gan Wuji wasn't stupid, as he was able to become the #1 expert on the universe combat ranking. He finally realized that Yi Fei's attitude was abnormal. Behind Yi Fei's simple smile, there was so much hostility that he couldn't detect it immediately. Of course, this wasn't because Yi Fei hid it well. Gan Wuji's battle experience and adaptability were too lacking. If it had been Yi Fei, he definitely wouldn't have given him the Sky Desolate elixir before Yi Fei had even sworn allegiance to him. In the end, Gan Wuji was too arrogant. He didn't even think of Yi Fei as an opponent. This sudden turn of events made Dan Yuanzi and Dan Ling see hope in their despair. With the Dan Yuanzi sect's alchemy skills, they didn't need to look. They only needed to use their divine sense to sense the pill spirit. She was sure that Gan Wuji had given them the complete Sky Desolate elixir. However, this was what made Dan Ling afraid. Gan Wuji had given them the Sky Desolate elixir, which meant that he was determined to make Yi Fei submit. In the end, not only had Yi Fei refused to submit, he had even played Gan Wuji in front of everyone. The consequences of this were extremely serious. It wasn't just Dan Ling, and the others who were sweating on Yi Fei's behalf. The other cultivators were also looking at Yi Fei and Gan Wuji with fearful gazes. Ma Tai seized this opportunity and roared angrily, "Demon of the East, you're crazy. You can't fool anyone, but you even dare to humiliate young Master Wuji like this. Men, go and kill him. Bring back his flesh and that dragon turtle for me." Boom. It would have been better if Ma Tai hadn't said this. Gan Wuji thought about how he, the young master of the Wuji sect and the #1 expert on the stars ranking, had been played by Yi Fei. He had even wasted a Sky Desolate elixir. Gan Wuji's anger exploded. A shocking amount of anger burst out of him. Before the quasi-emperor of the Heavy Cauldron sect could deal with Yi Fei, Gan Wuji had already appeared on the arena. Suddenly, he punched at Yi Fei. "You dare to trick me, Gan Wuji? You can only die." Gan Wuji's star-like eyes flashed with coldness and murderous intent. His fist was filled with the power to shatter space as he punched towards Yi Fei. "Good. I want to see what kind of ability the #1 on the stars ranking has to make you feel so superior. How dare you look down on the martial artists of our sky martial continent?" Yi Fei's eyes also exploded with a cold light. Even though Gan Wuji hadn't said anything to slander him, Yi Fei could tell from Gan Wuji's actions that this person held deep disdain and contempt for him and the martial practitioners of the Tianwu continent. This attitude completely enraged Yi Fei. Furthermore, he had already received news that the Infinity Sect had started to take notice of him. Since this was unavoidable, he would fight Gan Wuji fair and square. At the same time, he would also find out why the Infinity Sect had started to target him. Kill. Yi Fei's body once again shone with a golden light. He was like a golden war demon as he punched out at Gan Wuji. "Idiot! Do you really think that you're the only one with a half-god weapon body? Gan Wuji, will make you and all the other martial practitioners of the continent fall into despair." Bang! As they spoke, Yi Fei and Gan Wuji's fists collided. A terrifying explosion occurred, causing the entire arena to explode. Amidst the explosion, Yi Fei's body did not move at all. Seeing that he couldn't defeat Qian Wuji with pure strength, Yi Fei activated the way of the god of war and used the fist of life and death. Instantly, a purple-gold fist light shattered the void and enveloped the entire arena. Limitless universe. Gan Wuji's eyes shone with starlight. Then his entire body shone with a star-like light. Once again, he clashed with Yi Fei's life and death fist technique, shattering Yi Fei's life and death fist technique. However, just as Gan Wuji thought that he had completely suppressed Yi Fei, a golden sword light suddenly appeared between Yi Fei's eyebrows. "Since our physical bodies are on par, I will compete with you in mind energy." Sword of Truth. Yi Fei used his physical body to block Qian Wuji's star power. Then, he activated his mental nebula and released an extremely powerful beam of golden sword light. This beam of sword light instantly broke through Qian Wuji's physical defense. Then, it slashed towards Gan Wuji's soul. Mind armor. Gan Wuji was shocked. As the #1 expert on the stars ranking, he didn't have much battle experience. However, his combat strength was terrifying. In the face of this sudden mental attack, Gan Wuji instantly turned his consciousness into a mind armor, perfectly protecting his soul. His soul also blocked Yi Fei's mental attack. However, just as Gan Wuji thought that Yi Fei had used up all his tricks, suddenly, Yi Fei's mind nebula roared. The golden mind nebula continued to shoot out terrifying sword of truth. 1, 2, 3, 10. 10 true swords slashed at Qian Wuji's soul. No matter how strong Qian Wuji's spiritual godly armor was, it couldn't withstand it. Qian Wuji's eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were bleeding. His handsome face was covered in blood, and he looked extremely ferocious. Gan Wuji's heart was in turmoil. For the first time, he looked at Yi Fei in shock and shouted, "How is this possible? Gan Wuji, not only have the best physical body in the universe, my mind energy is also enough to crush any peerless genius. How can your mind energy be stronger than those peerless geniuses? Who the hell are you? I'm the one who will kill you." Yi Fei's face turned serious. His mind energy was already comparable to a real shaman's, but he still couldn't break through Gan Wuji's mind armor. This made Yi Fei very depressed. He knew that if he didn't use his full strength, he wouldn't be able to defeat Gan Wuji, the number 1 on the stars ranking. Instantly, a whistling sword chi appeared on Yi Fei's body. That sword chi shattered the void and destroyed the heavens. 12 sword mountains rose from the ground. The rolling sword chi was like mountains and rivers, like raging waves, like a majestic azure dragon, like a roaring white tiger, like an exploding vermilion bird, like a majestic black tortoise. Soon, the 4 true martial godly swords appeared and slashed towards Qian Wuji's body. In the blink of an eye, Qian Wuji's clothes were torn to shreds. Unfortunately, Yi Fei's sudden attack wasn't able to kill Gan Wuji. At the critical moment, a terrifying sword world appeared on Gan Wuji's body. Chapter 1650. Gan Wuji roared. His voice was filled with anger and frustration. As the strongest cultivator in Starry Sky, he had never fought so hard before. Apart from his physical body, he was able to compete with Yi Fei. However, in terms of spiritual energy, he was completely suppressed by Yi Fei. He had lost the initiative to fight. In a short period of time, he was completely suppressed by Yi Fei. Gan Wuji's anger made him unleash a terrifying sword intent. Releasing a Tian-level domain wasn't enough. In his anger, he released an even more terrifying Tian-level domain. God's domain. Under the God's domain, Gan Wuji seemed to have turned into a glorious god. His eyes shone with starlight. His domain released a godly aura. Every move he made could summon the power of heaven and earth. When he roared, lightning appeared in the sky and the ground started to shake. This was Gan Wuji's power. His sword could connect with gods. Gan Wuji used his sword Dao to connect with his divine ability. In an instant, what appeared in front of the crowd wasn't Gan Wuji himself, but a god's incarnation. It tore through the sky and slashed forward. Boom! Cracks appeared on the entire meteorite arena under this terrifying sword light. Yi Fei's mind was also greatly shaken when he faced this sword directly. He had the illusion that he was facing the sword god, but soon he sneered again. Sword Dao connecting with gods. Then I will slay gods. Demon connecting with gods. Then I will slay demons. My sword is the god-slaying sword. It is also the demon-slaying sword. The sword depended on oneself. It didn't depend on others. This was Yi Fei's sword. This was Yi Fei's sword. The sword was like the man. The man was like the sword. At that moment, Yi Fei seemed to have reached the pinnacle of the sword Dao. Lightning surrounded his body. Ice and snow held around his body. Tian-level domain, lightning. Tian-level domain, ice. When the two domains appeared, Yi Fei's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have comprehended something from Gan Wuji's sword Dao connection. This kind of comprehension couldn't be understood by outsiders. Only sword cultivators who truly understood swords could understand it. Under the old master Jian's constant guidance, Yi Fei happened to be someone who understood the sword. He hadn't used the illuminated sword heart for a long time. At this moment, Yi Fei's sword force and domain broke through the limits and achieved a miraculous fusion. Kill! Suddenly, Yi Fei reached out his hand and grabbed at his own ice domain and lightning domain. The two heaven domains suddenly compressed and formed a strange sword light that flashed with lightning and ice. With a boom, it slashed forward and collided with Gan Wuji's sword light. Together, godlike sword Dao. How could you possibly know godlike sword Dao? Gan Wuji's heart was filled with shock. One had to know that only sword cultivators at the peak could comprehend and use moves like godlike sword Dao. It wasn't just a martial art, it was a realm. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that only 1 out of 10 sword cultivators at the peak could comprehend godlike sword Dao. That was a huge achievement. In the past, even Gan Wuji had to spend 10 years to comprehend godlike sword Dao. At this moment, Yi Fei was able to use it with just a glance. This was absolutely shocking. How could Gan Wuji know that Yi Fei had a genius sword cultivator like the sword maniac elder by his side? Perhaps Yi Fei didn't know many sword techniques, but Yi Fei's understanding of the sword Dao had reached the Dao of sword Dao. When the Dao of sword Dao entered the Dao of sword Dao, one could comprehend godlike sword Dao. However, Yi Fei's godlike sword Dao wasn't as glorious as Gan Wuji's godlike sword Dao. In fact, Yi Fei didn't have any godlike sword Dao behind him. His godlike sword Dao was himself. His sword Dao was like his godlike sword Dao. One with the sword Dao. My godlike sword Dao. Boom, boom. Yi Fei's sword Dao finally broke through Gan Wuji's sword. Yi Fei's eyes burned with battle intent. Yi Fei's sword Dao roared like a hurricane. My sword Dao is like my sword Dao. My sword Dao is like my sword Dao. Only the best sword cultivators can ignite my sword Dao, because only a battle at the pinnacle can allow my sword to be infinitely sharp. Gan Wuji, come here. Let's fight again. Boom. The dazzling purple-gold sword light illuminated the entire area. However, this time, the offensive and defensive positions were reversed. Yi Fei's sword was filled with boundless battle intent. It tore apart the sky and the indestructible meteorite arena. This was the attack of a sword cultivator. Once the sword was out, it would take a life. Once the sword was out, it would never turn back. Tian-level quasi-emperor. You're a Tian-level quasi-emperor. Damn it, you're definitely not a nobody. Who are you? Gan Wuji was furious. Everyone was staring at him. No matter if it was his status as the young master of the everlasting sect or the #1 on the stars ranking, no one could accept the fact that he wasn't as strong as Yi Fei. Gan Wuji's sword became even more terrifying. He was still using the sword Dao connecting divinity. He didn't use any tricks. It was a pure battle of swords. However, this time, his sword wasn't as simple as 2 Tian-level domains. Another Tian-level domain appeared behind Gan Wuji's back. Star domain, sword domain, god domain, sword domain, shouted Gan Wuji furiously. His body was filled with murderous chi and a boundless sword light. Then, his 3 Tian spheres merged together and created a new and profound sword technique. Sword domain, that's the sword god realm. It said that limitless sex demigod is a terrifying sword god. Not only did he create sword Dao connecting gods, he even created domain sword, this kind of peculiar sword Dao. Sky Spear Elder was fascinated. Watching a battle between experts was a very valuable experience. It was also very beneficial for one's breakthrough. Especially at this moment, there were 2 powerful heavenly quasi-emperors fighting each other. Such a battle was undoubtedly rare. But soon, the Sky Spear old man came to his senses. Wait, Tian level? How can little friend Dongfang be a Tian-level quasi-emperor? He has 2 Tian-level domains. Sky Spear Elder suddenly felt his body tremble. No, it's not 2, it's 3. Another terrifying world appeared behind him. Is that the Blood Devil domain? Dan Ling was a bit startled. The Blood River sect's strongest domain was the Blood Devil domain. Many people in the starry sky had heard of it. If she hadn't been certain that Yi Fei had come from the Martial Heaven continent, Dan Ling would have suspected that Yi Fei was the Blood Spirit Master or some other peerless genius of the Blood River sect. Boom! The meteorite arena could no longer withstand Yi Fei and Qian Wuji's sword aura. The two sides of the meteorite arena suddenly split apart and turned into bright stars. Attracted by Qian Wuji's sword domain, it turned into a broken star sword and slashed forward. Chapter 1651. I won't be able to block this sword. Yi Fei felt defeated. This defeat wasn't because of Gan Wuji's strength, but because of Gan Wuji's mastery of the sword Dao. After all, ever since Yi Fei had embarked on the path of a sword cultivator, he had never tasted defeat. He could even easily crush the Blood Spirit Master. Unfortunately, his opponent this time was Gan Wuji, the #1 expert on the star list. It was obvious that Gan Wuji was also a terrifying sword Dao expert. What was even more frightening was that there had once been a sword god in the Wuji sect. Although this sword god had been dead for tens of thousands of years, his inheritance had definitely been left behind. Gan Wuji had perfectly executed the sword god's inheritance. This meant that Yi Fei was no longer fighting Gan Wuji, but rather the sword god's inheritance. This way, Yi Fei wouldn't be able to withstand it. After all, his Tai Chi sword Dao had been created by himself, so its might hadn't been fully unleashed. On the other hand, the sword god's inheritance had already reached the Dao stage. I simply can't win if I use my sword Dao against my sword Dao. However, this isn't a battle of swords. Since swords won't work, I'll use other martial arts. Chapter 1652. Seeing that Gan Wuji had only guessed his identity and couldn't confirm it, Yi Fei decided to attack him further. It would be even better if he could kill Gan Wuji on the spot. Yi Fei denied it seriously. I'm sorry, I'm not Yi Fei. However, I've heard of this person. He fought alone in the universe and killed the Scorching Sun sect and the Blood River sect. He's a true hero. Compared to Yi Fei, I, Dongfang Yu, am not even half as good. If you fight against Yi Fei, you won't even be able to take one move before you die. Yi Fei mercilessly attacked Gan Wuji's #1 on the star list, and, at the same time, made himself look good. Normally, with Gan Wuji's intelligence, he would have immediately discovered the flaw in Yi Fei's words. Since Dongfang Yu didn't know Yi Fei, how could he be so sure of Yi Fei's true strength? However, Gan Wuji had just been defeated by Yi Fei, and it was a crushing defeat. Aside from the fact that he could barely suppress Yi Fei with the sword god's inheritance, he had lost miserably in all other aspects, even though he was the #1 on the stars ranking. This was a huge blow to Gan Wuji's invincible spirit. The invincible spirit he had built up over the past few decades almost collapsed on the spot. When he heard that he might not even be able to take one move from Yi Fei, Gan Wuji's face was filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe it. His face was filled with pain and struggle. Could it be that the peerless genius of the continent is really that strong? I can't believe that I, Gan Wuji, can't even defeat a nameless person. What's the point of me being the #1 on the stars ranking? Ha ha ha! Gan Wuji's voice sounded like he was crying and laughing at the same time. He was in a daze. After all, Gan Wuji was the young master of the everlasting sect and a peerless genius. Ever since he had started cultivating, he had never been defeated. He had experienced many dangerous battles. Yi Fei had to admit that in terms of talent, he wasn't as strong as Gan Wuji. However, in terms of fighting, he was stronger than Gan Wuji. However, in terms of fighting experience, Yi Fei was miles ahead of Gan Wuji. It was also because of this that Yi Fei, who had been through so much in the face of failure, was able to face it calmly. However, Gan Wuji, who had been through so much, would lose his composure after his first failure, and a complete defeat at that. Yi Fei believed that as long as he worked harder, he would be able to give Gan Wuji a few more blows. Even if he couldn't destroy the number one on the stars ranking, Ganwuji's number one, he would be unable to recover for a long time. Furthermore, the martial heaven continent and the starry skies sects were mortal enemies. The six sacred sects and the everlasting sect already had enmity with each other. Yi Fei naturally wouldn't show mercy to his enemies. He immediately prepared to work even harder to destroy Ganwuji's undefeatable confidence. Just at this moment, a group of continental martial artists charged over from the back of the crowd. The one at the front pointed at Yi Fei and roared like a wounded beast. "Goddamn devil Yi. Even if you turn to dust, we'll still recognize you. Yi Fei, devil Yi, you'll die a horrible death. You're heartless. You and that bastard Fa Ehai have caused our legalism family to suffer so much. Young Master Wuji, don't fall for this devil's tricks. He looks honest, but he's extremely sinister. Back then, my legalism family suffered because of his honest face, leading to the destruction of our family. He is Yi Fei, the real Yi Fei. He's also the one your everlasting sect is looking for. Yi Fei." This group of continental martial artists was none other than the head of the legalism family, Fa Dongxian, as well as a group of martial emperors and elders. Because the legalism family's spirit vein had been plundered by Yi Fei, and their treasures had been taken away by Shanghua, the legalism family had lost all their foundation. Not only had they been unable to become a quasi-emperor family, but their enemies had also taken advantage of them. In the end, they couldn't even stay on the continent. They could only flee into the starry sky and work as laborers. It was also because of this that Fa Dongxian and the other elders clenched their teeth in their dreams, cursing Yi Fei and Fa Ehai to die horrible deaths. Recently, Fa Dongxian had heard that the Heavy Cauldron sect was recruiting guests, so he had brought a large group of elders to Pill Cauldron City to see if he could become a guest and alleviate the legalism family's current hardships. Fa Dongxian had been lucky. When he had arrived, he had heard that there was a Pill Cauldron battle. He had brought a group of elders over to watch the show, but who would have thought that he would actually see Yi Fei, whom he wished he could bite to death even in his dreams. Instantly, the eyes of Fa Dongxian and the other elders of the legalism family turned bloodshot. When they heard Yi Fei deny his identity, they immediately jumped out and exposed Yi Fei in front of everyone. Seeing the sudden appearance of the legalism family, Yi Fei was so angry that his face turned ashen. He cursed inwardly at how unlucky he was. This was truly a narrow road for enemies. He had fallen too far. Ganwuji instantly roused from his dejection. He looked at Yi Fei in astonishment, then at the legalism family, who were filled with hatred. In the end, he was still the number one genius on the star ranking. As soon as Ganwuji recovered, he was immediately enraged. "Damn it, Yi Fei. You are that demon Yi. You are actually so sinister. You almost caused me to lose all my confidence and go berserk. Die, I want you to die." Boom! Ganwuji was incomparably enraged. In his fury, he was the first to charge at Yi Fei. He immediately roared at Lord Ma. "Sect Master Ma, what are you waiting for? If you want the everlasting sect support, then gather all the quasi-emperors in Pill Cauldron City. Kill that demon Yi. All quasi-emperors of Pill Cauldron City, listen up. Whoever participates in attacking Yi Fei will be rewarded with a pseudo-divine weapon. Anyone who kills Yi Fei will be rewarded with a desolate sky pill." Ganwuji was still very smart. He knew that contacting the Heavy Cauldron sect wasn't enough, so he immediately threw out a huge reward. When they heard that attacking Yi Fei would give them a pseudo-divine weapon, and that killing Yi Fei together would give them a desolate sky pill, the hundreds of quasi-emperors present were all in an uproar. Even many of the elders of the core pill sect were in an uproar. Fa Dongxian roared in ecstasy, "Yi Fei, your death has finally come. The time for the legalism family to take revenge has finally come. The heavens have opened their eyes. That demon Yi has done all sorts of bad things. He has finally received his retribution. What a pity that the legalism family only had 30 spirit veins. If we had known, we would have thrown them out to feed the dogs." We wouldn't have let that demon Yi and that bastard Fa Ehai ruin them. The group of elders of the legalism family were all in tears as they cheered. The many quasi-emperors of Pill Cauldron City were all red-eyed. When they heard Gan Wuji's promise, more than 50 Earth-grade quasi-emperors roared and charged at Yifei. Behind them, Ma Wangya also led many experts of the Heavy Cauldron sect to join the battle. Dan Er's face instantly turned pale. She said in a trembling voice, "How can this be? He is actually the third on the stars ranking, Yifei. He even defeated Gan Wuji and became the enemy of all the quasi-emperors. Father, what should we do?" This was the first time Dan Er felt so confused. Dan Yuanzi smiled bitterly and sighed. "What else can we do? This matter is no longer something we can interfere with. The Core Pill sect can only remain neutral. I think this young Master Yi will understand our difficulties." Chapter 1653. Don't even think about leaving, Demon Yi. Return my family's spirit vein. You caused us too much trouble. Even if I become a ghost, I'll skin you alive. Fa Dongshuan's anger soared to the sky. The group of Fa family elders behind him were also filled with resentment. The other quasi-emperors of Danding City went crazy after being provoked by the Sky Desolate Pill and the half-god weapon. They were all fearless warriors who wanted to stop Yifei and tear him to pieces. However, the speed of the Great Void technique was too fast. By the time Yifei realized that the situation was not good, he had already suffered from a quasi-emperor sealing the void. So, he did not linger in battle. He executed the void steps, grabbed Dan Er, and left. As for why he took Dan Er, it was because she still had a Sky Desolate Pill on her. Yifei didn't have time to ask for it, so he could only take the pill along with her. This scene made Qian Wuji so angry that his true Yuan went berserk. Only now did Qian Wuji remember that he should have led the heaven-grade quasi-emperors of the Heavy Cauldron sect to seal the void and prevent Yifei from escaping. Unfortunately, his battle experience was still lacking compared to Yifei's lightning speed. That damn dragon turtle. How can it know the void technique? How can it run faster than Demon Yi? Another angry roar came from Ma Tai's mouth. He originally wanted to take advantage of the fact that Yifei was surrounded and had no time to care about the dragon turtle. He wanted to take the initiative and capture the dragon turtle. The dragon turtle's reaction was faster than Yifei's. When it saw that the situation was not good, it immediately ran faster than a thief. Yifei was still being attacked, but it had already used the same Great Void technique and escaped into the void in advance. It also escaped Ma Tai's long-planned capture. Ma Tai was so angry that his stomach almost exploded. The many guest elders of the Heavy Cauldron sect were also cursing. Then, naturally, everyone glared angrily at Dan Yuanzi and the others who were still in the city. Core sect. Colluding with Demon Yi and going against the Wuji sect is a heinous crime. Young Master Wuji, please give the order to eradicate the Danyuan faction and return Danding City to its former glory. Lord Ma's gaze was ferocious. In any case, he had even sold his ancestors, so he didn't mind taking advantage of this opportunity to send the Pill Origin sect away. This way, even without the support of the Wuji sect, the Heavy Cauldron sect could still dominate Danding City. Sky Spear Elder and Dan Yuanzi quickly understood Lord Ma's sinister intentions. Dan Yuanzi's face changed. He was engrossed in alchemy, and dealing with crises was not his forte. Fortunately, he had Sky Spear Elder by his side, who was used to seeing storms. When he thought of Yifei's sudden action of grabbing Dan before he left, heavens. The old spearman suddenly came to his senses. Young Master Wuji, please listen to our explanation. Not only did Demon Yi disguise himself as Dongfang Yu and deceive our core sect, he also took away Deputy Sect Leader Dan Er. In fact, our core sect is also a victim. Sky Spear Elder took the opportunity to step forward and stomp on Dan Yuanzi's foot. Dan Yuanzi recovered from his panic and immediately made a decision. He hurriedly led a group of elders and knelt down in front of Gan Wuji. Young Master Wuji, please save my daughter. Our core sect is willing to listen to your orders. Lorma was suddenly enraged. He roared, Dan Yuenzi, you shameless old man. Your daughter hooked up with Demon Yi. Everyone in Danding City knows about this. Now what face do you have to rely on young Master Wuji and join the Wuji sect? Many of my core sect's pill formulas are unique to the Starry Sky. Young Master Wuji, please give us 10 days. 10 days later, we will definitely organize all of our pill formulas and offer them to the Wuji sect. Dan Yuenzi wasn't stupid. When Yi Fei had left, he had clearly been hinting at him to delay. Although Dan Yuenzi wasn't sure what kind of storm he could cause in 10 days, he knew that this might be his core sect's final chance. Dan Yuenzi steeled himself and tossed out a temptation that no sect could refuse. Hearing that, Gan Wuji's murderous gaze softened. After all, his goal in coming to Danding City was to subdue the Heavy Cauldron sect and the core sect. It was to prepare for the Wuji sect's future domination of the Starry Sky Path and even their invasion of the Martial Heaven continent. Ordinary martial artists didn't know what the appearance of peerless geniuses on the Martial Heaven continent meant. But a large sect like the Wuji sect was very clear. This was very likely a sign that a great era was coming. Once a large number of martial emperors and martial gods appeared on the Martial Heaven continent, it would be a huge threat to the Wuji sect and the Starry Sky sections. If they wanted to eliminate this threat, the Wuji sect would have to take the initiative. They would have to unify the Starry Sky Path and then take over the Martial Heaven continent. Once the Wuji sect became the new master of the Starry Sky Path and the Martial Heaven continent, not only would they not be threatened, but they would also be able to enjoy the benefits of the Great Era. The spirit veins would awaken, martial emperors would appear, and martial gods would appear. The path of martial arts would be even more glorious than the ancient times. Should I call you young Master Dongfang or Demon Yi? Outside Danding City, Dan Ling had a complicated expression. She hated Yi Fei for implicating the core sect, but she also knew that even if Yi Fei hadn't been involved, the Wuji sect wouldn't have let the core sect off. Given Dan Yuenzi's temperament and the Pill Cauldron sect's ancestral teachings, the primary Pill sect would rather be destroyed than submit to the everlasting sect. What awaited the primary Pill sect was complete destruction. This was why Dan Ling's feelings were complicated. On one hand, she was grateful to Yi Fei for saving her from the whirlpool of destruction. On the other hand, she couldn't bear to see Dan Yuenzi and Sky Spear Doyen be destroyed along with the core Essence sect under the wrath of the everlasting sect. Vice Sect Master, don't worry. This matter started because of me, so I'll take responsibility and resolve it. Furthermore, the Heavenly Spear Elder is a smart person, and he's experienced. He'll definitely understand why I captured you. I don't dare say too much, but if we delay it for 10 days, as long as your father isn't an idiot, he'll be able to do it. He'll definitely think of a way to do it. Yi Fei could understand Dan Ling's feelings. Although the core sect's crisis wasn't entirely caused by him, it was more or less implicated by him. That made it so he couldn't just walk away like he usually did. Thus, Yi Fei made a promise. Within 10 days, I'll definitely think of a way to help your core sect get through this crisis, said Yi Fei solemnly. I don't have any extravagant hopes that you can resolve this crisis for my core sect. The Wuji sect is too powerful. Unless you're a martial emperor and can completely destroy the Wuji sect, you won't be able to resolve this crisis. I only hope that you can save my father and Elder Tian. Chapter 1654. Yi Fei also nodded solemnly. I will do my best to fulfill your conditions. After all, I am still a guest elder of the primary Pill sect. With your words, I am at ease. All right, this is the heavenly desolate pill that Gan Wuji gave you. I have already checked it. There are no problems. You can use it without worry. Dan Ling was very smart. She knew that Yi Fei did not save her simply because he liked her. It was mainly for the heavenly desolate pill in her hands. Yi Fei did not deny this. If not for the heavenly desolate pill, he would not have participated in the Pill Cauldron battle and fought with Gon Wuji. After all, one heavenly desolate pill could allow a quasi-emperor who was not a peerless genius to obtain a heavenly domain. Furthermore, it could allow a peerless genius to save a lot of time and cultivate even more heavenly domains. Such a temptation was enough to drive any quasi-emperor crazy. This could be seen from the frenzied attacks of the quasi-emperors in Pill Cauldron City. The only unfortunate thing was that time was tight. The primary Pill sect could only delay for 10 days at most. If Yifei could not find a solution within 10 days, the primary Pill sect would really be destroyed. I don't care about anything else, but the primary Pill sect needs that heavenly desolate pill. I must obtain it. Furthermore, I made a promise. Big Black, take the Vice Sect Master and leave quickly. Within the beast mark space, Xiao Chao could already sense a few strong quasi-emperor auras rapidly approaching. Gon Wuji would not be willing to let Yifei escape so easily. After successfully forcing Dan Yuanzi to surrender, Gon Wuji immediately sent out a large number of quasi-emperors to search for Yifei. At this moment, staying near Pill Cauldron City was very dangerous. Furthermore, Yifei alone could not fight against Gon Wuji and all the quasi-emperors in Pill Cauldron City. It seems like I still need to rely on external help. Coincidentally, the Tyrannosaurus King's dragon saliva is also gone. That is a good item to sell for spirit stones. Dragon Turtle, hurry up. When we reach the Tyrannosaurus King's nest, you can eat as many spirit stones as you want. As he spoke, Yifei tossed a handful of spirit stones into the distance. Almost at the same time, the dragon turtle hurriedly escaped into the void and accurately swallowed all the spirit stones into its stomach. Then, as if it had been injected with chicken blood, the dragon turtle excitedly carried Yifei and Dan Ling towards the Tyrannosaurus King's nest. He hurried over. Dan Ling's eyes widened in shock. You're using a Shang clan's void steps. How can a dragon turtle use it too? Yifei's heart skipped a beat as he asked curiously. You knew I was using the void steps? Of course I know. The Heavy Cauldron Sect's 7th Elder once used the void steps to launch a sneak attack on my grandfather. Thus, I spent a large sum of money to investigate this person's background. Later on, I found out that he seemed to be an escaped slave of the Sky Devil Shang clan. Due to a mistake, he escaped into the starry skies. Thus, he could grasp a portion of the void steps. However, I feel that the void steps you've grasped is even more complete than the 7th Elders. Could it be that you're from the Shang clan? Dan Ling asked in a roundabout manner. There was no helping it. Who told Yifei to have a criminal record of impersonating others? Now, Dan Ling didn't even dare to completely believe in Yifei's name. Regarding this, Yifei was also speechless. Actually, I'm an honest person. I'll tell you the truth. This isn't the void steps, but the turtle steps. It's a special, innate martial art of the dragon turtle. Just like the 100ly instant, it took me a long time to learn the dragon turtle's turtle steps. Seeing that the Shang clan's void steps was so famous, Yifei had already decided that he would absolutely not admit that he had learned the Great Void technique. He could only admit that this was the turtle steps. Turtle steps? Dan Ling faintly felt that something was amiss. However, she had never seen a dragon turtle that could learn the void technique. She had never even heard of it. Immediately, Dan Ling couldn't help but wonder if she had really misunderstood Yifei. Of course, Yifei wouldn't explain. Taking advantage of the few days of travel, Yifei took out the Sky Desolate elixir and slowly refined it. Boom! As the Sky Desolate elixir was refined, an incomparably majestic and mysterious energy suddenly appeared on Yifei's body. That energy seemed like spiritual energy, but it was also of a higher level. Yifei knew that this might be the power of the Desolate Vein. The Sky Desolate elixir was refined by condensing the power of the Desolate Vein. At the same time as this desolate energy entered his body, Yifei's Azure Dragon Domain also underwent an astonishing transformation. It started to gradually evolve from an Earth domain. This evolution process was supposed to be very long. Ordinary cultivators would need a few months or even a few years to complete the transformation. For example, the Tian Fa Quasi-Emperor had obtained half a sky desolate elixir. Hence, his domain had only surpassed the earth domain and not the heaven domain. He had been stuck there for a long time, which was very awkward. Furthermore, the sky desolate elixir was very rare in the starry skies. Not only was it hard to obtain, but even if land cultivators had money, they couldn't buy it. Hence, after so many years, the Tian Fa Quasi-Emperor's domain had always been a hair's breadth away from the heaven domain, which was very depressing. However, Yi Fei didn't have such worries. After all, he had a complete sky desolate elixir. If he could resolve the primary pill school's crisis, he might be able to obtain a second sky desolate elixir. Yi Fei didn't feel any heartache as he refined the sky desolate elixir. Unintentionally, Yi Fei's efficiency in refining the sky desolate elixir increased significantly. Originally, he had estimated that he would need at least 10 days to refine the sky desolate elixir. However, in reality, he only spent 5 days to completely refine the sky desolate elixir. Roar! The moment Yi Fei refined the sky desolate elixir, his azure dragon domain suddenly burst forth with resplendent domain light. It instantly transformed from the earth domain to the heaven domain. The might of his domain and martial techniques increased qualitatively once more. Henceforth, Yi Fei's heaven domain increased from 3 to 4. They were the ice domain, the thunder domain, the blood demon domain, and the azure dragon domain. Dan Ling also knew that Yi Fei didn't just have 4 heaven domains. He also had the Taiji domain and the vermilion bird domain. One was an earth domain, and the other was a king domain. After considering the primary pill school's crisis and needing Yi Fei's help, Dan Ling gritted her teeth and took out another sky desolate elixir. Young Master Yi, take this sky desolate elixir. As long as you can help the primary pill school tide over this crisis, my father guarantees that the primary pill school will repay you generously. Clearly, while Yi Fei was refining the sky desolate elixir, Dan Ling had already contacted Dan Yuanzi through the voice transmission mirror. As Yi Fei had expected, when Dan Yuanzi expressed that he would take out all the pill formulas and submit completely, even though she didn't trust the primary pill school, she was also afraid that Dan Yuanzi would fight to the death. Chapter 1655. The dragon tortoise was known for its speed, ever since it learned the void technique. No, it should be the tortoise steps. The dragon tortoise used its advantage of being fast to the limit. The most comfortable thing was that since the dragon tortoise could enter the void, Yi Fei no longer had to worry about being harassed by desolate beasts along the way. After all, there were different types of desolate beasts. After evolving to the level of the Tyrannosaurus King, their cultivation and mental habits were no different from human heaven stage quasi-emperors. Most of the desolate beasts, even if they had evolved to a very high level, still retained their savage nature. They were even more hostile towards the human race. They had a huge animosity. These desolate beasts were also the most dangerous. If they were alone, it would be fine. However, if they were in a group, even a heaven stage quasi-emperor would have a hard time dealing with them. When she saw that Yi Fei was actually going to ask for help from the Tyrannosaurus King, even the strong-willed Dan Ling felt dizzy. Working together with desolate beasts? How is that possible? If that were possible, the Tyrannosaurus King would not have trampled so many of the guest elders we sent out. Dan Ling shook her head, feeling that Yi Fei was indulging in fantasy. After all, the core pill sect had been coveting the Tyrannosaurus King's saliva for a long time. Because of this, countless quasi-emperors had targeted the Tyrannosaurus King's saliva and tried various methods to obtain it. However, most of these people died miserably in the end. As time passed, very few people dared to target the Tyrannosaurus King's saliva in Danding City. However, Yi Fei was very confident about this. The Tyrannosaurus King's dragon tortoise did not care about anyone. However, when it came to Xiao Qiao, even the ancient dinosaurs could only beg for mercy before Xiao Qiao, let alone the Tyrannosaurus King's dragon tortoise. Of course, Yi Fei was not here to fight this time. He was here to seek an alliance with the Tyrannosaurus King. Yi Fei decided to be gentle. It would not be good if he scared the Tyrannosaurus King. Yi Fei soon found a young Tyrannosaurus King playing in the huge primeval forest. Even so, this Tyrannosaurus King was a consummation martial monarch. Furthermore, the Tyrannosaurus King's skin was tough. Even human quasi-emperors could only avoid it. Let's go. At one point, Danling was very nervous. She was afraid that Yi Fei's intrusion would incur the wrath of the tyrannical dragon. When it discovered that someone had intruded into its territory, the tyrannical dragon let out a furious roar, intending to swallow the intruder in one bite. However, the Tyrannosaurus soon saw the dragon turtle's appearance clearly. It also saw the familiar figure standing on the dragon turtle's back. The Tyrannosaurus' roar suddenly turned into a whimper, as though it had seen some terrifying vicious beasts. It actually started to run away. In the forest, the terrified roars of the Tyrannosaurus Rex group came one after another. King, it's bad. That person has come to rob our spirit vein again. In the forest, the Tyrannosaurus King's angry and sullen roars quickly resounded. Heavens, what sins have we Tyrannosaurs committed? Why are you here again? Even if you're trying to take advantage of others, you wouldn't be as fast and ruthless as you guys. Not only are you trying to take advantage of others, you even brought along another one. The Tyrannosaurus King regretted not choosing to move immediately after sending Yi Fei off. It had given Yi Fei another chance to take advantage of others. As the Tyrannosaurus King roared, hundreds of huge lantern-like eyes appeared in the surrounding forest. The moment the Tyrannosaurus Rex that appeared saw Yi Fei, their lantern-like eyes exploded with immense killing intent and anger. Yi Fei, is this what you told me? Are you very close to the Tyrannosaurus Rex? Dan Ling was even more regretful now. If she had known that Yi Fei and the Tyrannosaurus Rex had such a hostile relationship, she would never have stepped foot in this place. However, it was too late for regrets now. Hundreds of angry Tyrannosaurus Rex had already surrounded them. The Tyrannosaurus King's thick nostrils spewed out 2 plumes of thick smoke to express its anger. Yi Fei didn't seem to sense the Tyrannosaurus King's anger. He just smiled at the Tyrannosaurus King and said, "Don't worry, Tyrannosaurus King. I'm not here to bully you guys this time. On the contrary, I'm here to take you guys to bully others. Of course, if you don't agree, then I can only ask Xiao Qiao to ask you again later." After saying that, Yi Fei turned around to leave. Dan Ling was dumbfounded. How was Yi Fei an invitation? This was clearly a threat, let alone the Tyrannosaurus King. Even if it were her, she definitely wouldn't obediently submit to Yi Fei's casual threat. However, what shocked Dan Ling was that when the Tyrannosaurus King heard Yi Fei's words and saw that Yi Fei's tone didn't allow any refusal, the originally angry Tyrannosaurus King's expression suddenly changed. Its ferocious dragon face squeezed out a smile that was even uglier than a crying face. It immediately roared with laughter and said, "Ha ha ha." This king was wondering what it was. It's fine as long as we don't take advantage of others. Our Tyrannosaurus King actually likes to help others the most. Young Master Yi, don't go. Young Master Yi, please don't go. Very quickly, under Dan Ling-er's horrified gaze, the previously furious Tyrannosaurus King's group all nodded and bowed to Yi Fei with smiles. It was as if they were afraid that Yi Fei would call Xiao Qiao out. Dan Ling suddenly felt as if she couldn't think properly anymore. Even if you beat her to death, she couldn't imagine what method Yi Fei had used to make the ferocious Tyrannosaurus King's group so obedient. They were practically obedient. Of course, if she had seen how the Tyrannosaurus King was beaten to the ground by Xiao Qiao, trembling and doubting his life as a dragon, she would be able to understand how the Tyrannosaurus King was feeling right now. Yi Fei and the Tyrannosaurus King also very quickly began a pleasant conversation in a friendly atmosphere. At the same time, Danning City. Even though Dan Yuanzi had already clearly declared his allegiance to the everlasting sect, Lord Ma was still very unwilling. His old enemy had so easily obtained a chance to breathe. Furthermore, after the Heavy Cauldron sect had closely monitored them for a few days, they discovered that Dan Yuanzi had actually returned to their mountain gates and directly sealed them off. Lord Ma immediately seized this opportunity to pay a visit to Gan Wuji again. Young Master Wuji, there is something that this subordinate has to say. That old thing Dan Yuanzi is very stubborn. He will never sincerely submit to our Wuji sect. This subordinate suspects that this is Dan Yuanzi's trick to stall for time, in order to give Dan Ling, and that Devil Yi time to call for reinforcements. Time. Hearing Lord Ma mention Yi Fei, Gan Wuji's face instantly darkened. He ignored Lord Ma and asked F.A. Dongxian, who was behind him, Master F.A., what do you think about this matter? Lord Ma heard this and looked at F.A. Dongxian enviously. Ever since F.A. Dongxian jumped out and bravely exposed Yi Fei's true colors, F.A. Dongxian had undoubtedly won Gan Wuji's favor. At the same time, Gan Wuji considered that he was too inexperienced and might not be able to defeat Yi Fei, so he immediately acted as if he was experienced and hated Yi Fei deeply. Chapter 1656. Regarding Yi Fei, F.A. Dongxian could be said to have a deep grudge. After receiving Lord Ma's report and combining it with his own Jianghu experience, F.A. Dongxian very shrewdly said with certainty, Young Master Wuji, this old man can be sure that the surrender of the Danyuan sect is actually a sham. He's honest and simple, but he's actually very sinister. However, this person also has a huge weakness, and that's that he's very loyal and righteous. Therefore, as long as we take advantage of this weakness, no matter how strong Demon Yi becomes, we can still kill him in one strike. Gan Wuji was a little displeased when he heard this. He said coldly, Our Wuji sect has been doing this for a long time. However, the universe is so big, it is very difficult to catch a few people. F.A. Dongxian smiled coldly and said, Young Master Wuji, I am not talking about Yi Fei's friends and family. I am talking about the Primary Pill faction and Dan Ling. Regardless of whether Yi Fei has a special relationship with Dan Ling, it is a fact that he joined the Primary Pill faction as a guest elder. Now that the Primary Pill faction is about to be swallowed up, it is not Yi Fei's style to leave. He must have saved Dan Ling, to make up for this. If we destroy the Primary Pill faction now, not only will it not benefit us, it will also alert the enemy and make Demon Yi focus on escaping. Escape. F.A. Dongxian, are you saying that I was wrong? I should not have reported this to Young Master and allowed the Primary Pill faction to hide their evil intentions? Lord Ma looked coldly at F.A. Dongxian. F.A. Dongxian was once the head of a quasi-emperor family, so how could he take Lord Ma seriously? He smiled proudly and said in a deep voice, That's right. Is the Primary Pill sect more important? Or is killing Demon Yi more important? Why did Young Master leave the Primary Pill faction alive? Do you think Young Master Wuji is so inexperienced that even the Primary Pill faction is a scam? Young Master is clearly baiting. You deliberately left the Primary Pill faction alive, waiting for Yi Fei to take the bait. Then, Young Master will set up an inescapable net and kill Demon Yi. That's right. That is my plan. Master F.A.'s words have won my heart. Gan Wuji was very satisfied. He didn't think too much about it. He was just worried that Dan Yuanzi would destroy many of the Dan Yuanzi's recipes if he pushed him too hard. But F.A. Dongxuan's reminder made Gan Wuji realize the benefits of keeping the Essence Elixir sect alive. He could use the Essence Elixir sect to set up a trap for Yi Fei. Amazing, truly amazing. Indeed, to deal with a demon like Yi Fei, I needed an experienced martial artist like F.A. Dongxian to come up with a plan for me. On the contrary, this sect leader Ma, apart from having some ability in refining, is just too stupid. He almost ruined this young master's plans. Gan Wuji harumphed coldly and finally made up his mind. Fa Dongxian, you'll be in charge of dealing with Yi Fei this time. All of Danding City's martial artists will listen to your orders. If your plan can really kill Yi Fei, I guarantee that your school of legalism will shine even brighter in the universe than it does on land. Brilliant. This sentence turned the school of legalism from a salted fish into a dragon once again. Fa Dongxian was so excited that he immediately knelt down and kowtowed. Don't worry, young Master Wuji. Didn't Dan Yuanzi set a deadline of 10 days? I'm sure that after 10 days, Yi Fei will definitely appear in Danding City again. If he dares to appear, only death awaits him. However, to succeed, I need the Heavy Cauldron Sect and Sect Leader Ma's full cooperation. That's not a problem. Sect Leader Ma, from now on, you will listen to Fa Dongxuan's orders. His words are my words, Gan Wuji said in a low voice. Yes, young Master Wuji. Lord Ma smiled, but his heart was roaring like a wild beast. He was a sect leader after all. Normally, Fa Dongxian wouldn't even be worthy of carrying his shoes. Now, he had to listen to Fa Dongxuan's orders. F** King Fa Dongxian. You said Yi Fei is treacherous, but I think you're the most treacherous one. Lord Ma clenched his fists tightly, but he could only suppress his anger and strode away. Gan Wuji obviously felt Lord Ma's anger, but he only smiled slightly. He didn't care. After all, he was a young sect leader of the everlasting sect. Whether it was Lord Ma or Fa Dongxian, they were all his servants. He didn't need to care about his servants' feelings. He only cared about whether his servants would do their jobs well. It was like how a giant wouldn't care about an ant beneath his feet. Gan Wuji believed that he had done the right thing. If his servants were useful, then they should be rewarded appropriately. If they were useless, then they could be thrown away and replaced. Fa Dongxian, do your job well. As long as you perform well, you may have a chance to take over Lord Ma's position. Gan Wuji seemed to be hinting at something. This hint caused Fa Dongxian to become so excited that his breathing quickened. He respectfully retreated and began to make arrangements to set up the traps. As the core of the trap, the primary elixir sect would bear the brunt of it. Gan Wuji had originally given the primary elixir sect 10 days to hand over their pill formulas. However, this clearly wasn't ruthless enough. As soon as Fa Dongxian obtained his authority, he led Lord Ma and many other quasi-emperors to surround the primary elixir sect. Primary elixir sect, listen up. From now on, you will hand over 10 unique pill formulas every day. Hand over all your pill formulas within 10 days. If you can't do this, then you aren't truly loyal. I will follow young Master Wuji's orders and wipe out your entire sect. The head of the Fa family said in a low voice. He ordered. Lord Ma's face was filled with confusion. Head of the Fa family, didn't you say that we can't touch the primary elixir sect? Why are you doing this again? Sect Master Ma, when I said we can't touch them, I meant that we can't wipe out the primary elixir sect. However, this doesn't mean that we can't pressure them. As long as we put enough pressure on them, Dan Yuanzi will definitely panic and secretly contact Yi Fei. At that time, we'll close the door and beat the dog. When Yi Fei comes, he won't be able to return. Fa Dongxian laughed sinisterly. His laughter made Lord Ma shudder. He felt even more that Fa Dongxian was sinister and vicious. Even Lord Ma had wanted to wipe out the primary elixir sect before, but he hadn't used such a vicious method. Hearing Fa Dongxuan's ultimatum, Dan Yuanzi and many other elders of the primary elixir sect were furious. Some of the elders even roared, "The pill formulas are our inheritance. We can't hand over a single one. Sect Master, let's go all out." No, we can't go all out. All the quasi-emperors of Danding City are on the Wuji sect side. When we used to fight them. Since young Master Yi wants us to stall for 10 days, he will definitely have a way to help us within 10 days. The Sky Spear Elder said anxiously. However, the many elders of the primary elixir sect were doubtful. Dan Yuanzi also sighed. No matter how strong Yi Fei is, he's just one person. How can he fight against so many quasi-emperors of Danding City and the Wuji sect. If he really has a way, why hasn't there been any movement outside for 8 days? Boom! Before Dan Yuanzi could finish speaking, the entire Danding city seemed to shake. The 1,000-meter-tall city walls crumbled continuously. At the same time, the roars of a violent dragon shook the entire city and the entire small world of the primary elixir sect. Dan Yuanzi and the others were all stunned. They looked at each other in horror and said, "That's the sound of a violent dragon. Could there be a violent dragon outside, coming to attack the city?" Chapter 1657. This wasn't the first time in the history of Danding City that dire beasts attacked the city. In fact, ever since Danding City was built, it had been besieged by a large number of dire beasts. Danding City's 1,000-meter-tall city wall was built for this reason. It was like a giant wall that kept the dire beasts outside. It blocked the attacks of the dire beasts. However, the dire beasts that attacked the city didn't include the T-Rex. It wasn't that the T-Rex was gentle, but that they were usually very lazy. If they could lie down, they wouldn't sit. If they could sit, they wouldn't stand. As long as they didn't step into the T-Rex's territory, the T-Rex wouldn't care about the humans outside. Therefore, this was the first time that a group of Tyrannosauruses had suddenly attacked Danding City and attacked the city walls directly since the establishment of Danding City. Even Ganwuji was shocked. He immediately appeared in the sky above the city from the heavy cauldron sect's pocket dimension. He asked Lord Ma, "Lord Ma, what's going on? Why did the T-Rex suddenly attack the city?" "Young Master Wuji, I'm not sure about this either. However, the leader of the FA family is very resourceful. He definitely knows what's going on," Lord Ma said darkly. Fa Dongshuan's heart was filled with hatred, but he didn't show it on his face. He said, "Young Master Wuji, now is not the time to look into this. Please lead us to attack and stop the T-Rex outside. Don't let the T-Rex attack Danding City." Fa Dongxian had already set up many void ceiling traps in the city. He was just waiting for Yi Fei to fall for them. These traps couldn't be destroyed in advance. Gan Wuji also understood this point. Although he was very unhappy with the sudden attack of the T-Rex, he still made a decision. "All boundary emperors, follow me to protect Danding City. Lord Ma, I hope you won't disappoint me again." Obviously, Gan Wuji had put all the blame for the T-Rex's attack on Ma Wangye's head. This made Ma Wangye's face turn even uglier. However, Danding City was the foundation of the Heavy Cauldron sect, so they had no choice but to help. Ma Wangye could only use his fastest speed to gather all the guest elders and quasi-emperors of the Heavy Cauldron sect and the other quasi-emperors in Danding City. However, Lord Ma still felt a little indignant. As he gathered his subordinates, he used all his strength to shout at the violent dragon outside the city. "Violent Dragon King, the Heavy Cauldron sect has never offended you. Why are you attacking Danding City? Lord Ma, you shameless old thing. Since when did Danding City belong to your Heavy Cauldron sect?" Dan Ling Er's furious shout suddenly came from the head of one of the Tyrannosauruses. She was absolutely in high spirits right now. She'd never dreamed that she'd be able to lead several hundred Tyrannosauruses one day. She had mixed feelings about attacking Danding City, but at the same time, she was excited. Compared to Dan Ling Er's excitement, Yi Fei was much calmer. After all, he had seen martial gods and martial emperors. Even if the tyrannical dragon attacked the city, it was only a small scene. However, Yi Fei was still very pleased. After all, being able to lead a group of Tyrannosauruses to attack a huge city was a very impressive thing to do. At this moment, the dragon turtle looked even more majestic. It stood on the head of one of the Tyrannosauruses and roared continuously. Of course, the dragon turtle's attacks were negligible to the Tyrannosauruses. After all, most of the Tyrannosauruses were martial monarchs. What was even more frightening was that the Tyrannosaurus's flesh were comparable to demigods. Each of their bodies was comparable to a demigod weapon. Even if they didn't activate their true origin, their huge bodies would still smash into the city walls of Danding City. The city walls, which were thousands of meters high, instantly crumbled like layers of ice. Boom! Just as Ganwuji led a large group of quasi-emperors to try and stop the tyrannical dragons, hundreds of tyrannical dragons smashed a huge hole in Danding City's huge city walls. That hole was like a towering mountain that instantly crumbled. Dust filled the sky and covered half of the sky above Danding City. Many of the quasi-emperors who had rushed over were covered in dust. Then, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. Lord Ma's eyes widened as he looked at Yi Fei, who was standing on the head of the Tyrannosaurus, in disbelief. At this moment, even an idiot understood what was going on. How could it be him? Are these Tyrannosauruses crazy? They actually followed the orders of a human. Demon, this is a real demon. He can even attack a city with the Tyrannosauruses. What else can he do? Demon Yi, sinner. Do you know how many innocent lives have been lost because you colluded with desolate beasts to attack a city? Yi Fei, Dan Ling, you are the sinners of Danding City. Even if we become ghosts, we won't let you off. Many quasi-emperors were enraged. After all, many of these quasi-emperors' families were in Danding City. The matter of Yi Fei leading the Tyrannosauruses to attack the city already affected the interests of many of these quasi-emperors. Yi Fei had already expected this. However, he did not explain. Dan Ling who was beside him, already announced sternly, "Elders of Danding City, this time the Tyrannosauruses are only attacking the Heavy Cauldron sect and the Wuji sect. I guarantee that the Tyrannosauruses will not harm an innocent person. Life. Roar. We guarantee it." Young Master Yi said that those who oppose him will be killed. Those who don't will be spared. Break into the Heavy Cauldron sect and snatch the spirit vein, the treasures, and the territory. Under the Tyrannosaurus King's lead, hundreds of Tyrannosauruses roared angrily. Then, the Tyrannosauruses quickly charged into the city through the hole in the city walls. Many of the Tyrannosauruses immediately went berserk. Their eyes turned red as they spewed out hundreds of streams of terrifying dragon flames. The entire sky melted, turning into a terrifying world of flames. Dozens of Heavy Cauldron sect's martial monarchs were caught off guard. In just one exchange, they were burned to ashes. Many of the quasi-emperors were bewildered. They were shocked at the strength of the Tyrannosauruses and hesitated at Dan Ling's words. Gan Wuji's complexion turned ashen. Yi Fei, I underestimated you. However, even if you brought the Tyrannosauruses here to oppose me, Gan Wuji, you still have to die. Kill him. Kill him. Everyone will be rewarded with a heavenly desolate pill. Young Master Wuji has ordered that anyone who kills Yi Fei will be rewarded with a heavenly desolate pill. Kill. Everyone, don't be afraid. There are so many of us. We will definitely be able to kill these. Roar. A dragon roar shook the sky. However, it was not the Tyrannosaurus's roaring. Instead, it was Yi Fei releasing a rank 8 heavenly dragon. With the support of 4 heavenly domains, the 8 extreme heavenly dragons' might was undoubtedly even more terrifying. When Yi Fei executed this immemorial heavenly technique, it was like 8 different worlds appeared around him. The 8 quasi-emperors, who had been stimulated by the heavenly desolate pill, immediately widened their eyes. Their bodies and primordial spirits were crushed by the 8 extreme heavenly dragon. This scene frightened Gan Wuji, who was preparing to charge forward and fight Yi Fei again. He broke out in a cold sweat. Then, a crazed look of jealousy appeared in his eyes. 4 heavenly domains. Damn it, he actually has another heavenly domain. Yi Fei, just you wait, I'll kill you. Chapter 1658. Gan Wuji, where do you think you're going? Come and fight me if you have the guts. Yi Fei had long noticed Gan Wuji's figure. Killing intent instantly flashed through his heart. He hadn't forgotten that a few days ago, Gan Wuji had gathered all the quasi-emperors in the city to try and kill him because he couldn't beat him. At that time, he had been scared out of his wits. No matter how strong he was, there was no way he could face over 100 quasi-emperors at the same time without dying. Even if he had the bloodline god armor, he still wouldn't be able to do it. In the end, quantity was more important than quality, especially when over 100 quasi-emperors had teamed up and Ganwuji was the #1 expert on the stars ranking. Their attack power was enough to break through the bloodline god armor. Yi Fei could only take Dan Ling and run. Now, the situation had finally turned around. It wasn't Ganwuji who had brought a group of quasi-emperors to kill him. Yi Fei was the one who had brought a group of violent dragons to kill Ganwuji. Of course, he had to get back at Ganwuji. Therefore, after killing a few quasi-emperors, Yi Fei roared and used the Great Void technique to chase after Ganwuji. At the same time, the 8 extreme heavenly dragon roared and attacked again. Ganwuji, take this! Yi Fei, you're courting death. Feeling the danger behind him, Ganwuji angrily turned around. His God's Domain, Sword Domain, and Slaughter Domain all exploded out at the same time, forming a bright sword light that slashed forward. Sword Domain, 8 extreme heavenly dragon. Boom! The earth and sky were shaking violently. The air was being torn apart. The entire earth and sky were filled with a boundless amount of sword lights and dragon chants. Then, the sword lights disappeared, and the 8 celestial dragons were roaring. Their roars were so loud that the stars were falling from the sky. They were moving towards Ganwuji. Sword God's Light. Ganwuji roared furiously. As he spat out a mouthful of blood, his entire body suddenly turned into a dazzling sword light. He charged out of the attack range of the 8-level celestial dragon and into the heavy cauldron sect. Along with Ganwuji were Ma Wangya, Ma Tai, and the other elders of the heavy cauldron sect. But before they could all charge in, Yi Fei used the Great Void step again and was about to enter the void to continue chasing after Ganwuji. It was at this time that Fa Dongxian came over with a group of elders from the legalism sect. The moment they saw Yi Fei, all the elders' eyes turned red. Then they viciously cursed, "Demon Yi, don't even think about getting your way. Look at our legalism's void seal. You can't get away with it." With the heavy cauldron sect as the center, countless sealing runes suddenly appeared in the surrounding void. These runes were even more exquisite than the Blood River sect's quasi-emperor's method of sealing the void. This was also the specialty of the legalism sect. When it was used, Yi Fei immediately felt that the surrounding void had been completely sealed. Not only was he unable to move, but he also felt like he was being suppressed. Yi Fei realized that he had underestimated Fa Dongxian and the legalism sect. Even though the legalism sect had lost all its treasures and spirit veins, it still had some special resources as a powerful quasi-emperor family. For example, the legalism sect's outside of law was a secret trump card of the legalism sect. Caught off guard, Yi Fei had no choice but to be hit. His body became sluggish. Lord Ma immediately seized this opportunity and shouted angrily, "Yi Fei, you want to destroy my heavy cauldron sect? You're delusional. Prepare to see the king of hell. Release the emperor destroying arrow." Bang! At this moment, the world shook. It was like the sun and moon were destroyed, and the galaxy shook. Suddenly, a terrifying light of destruction burst out from the heavy cauldron sect. That light tore through the world and the firmament. Finally, it formed a divine arrow that could destroy everything and shot at Yi Fei. This was the heavy cauldron sect's trump card, the Emperor Destroying Arrow. As the name implied, the might of this arrow light was enough to kill a martial emperor. The instant the arrow light appeared, Yi Fei felt a chill run down his spine. He felt like he was facing the god of death. Bang! Suddenly, the world behind Yi Fei tore as well. Similarly, a destructive arrow light tore through the firmament and clashed with the heavy cauldron sect's Emperor Destroying Arrow. Then, they destroyed each other. My Essence Core sect has the Emperor Destroying Arrow as well. Furthermore, our two sects only have one each. This is our final trump card. Dan Yuanzi and the Heavenly Spear Old Man suddenly led a large group of Essence Core sect elders over from a distance. At the crucial moment, they also used the Emperor Destroying Arrow to block Ma Wangya. This was Ma Wangya's final counterattack. Ma Wanya was so angry that he vomited a mouthful of blood. Dan Yuanzi, you are indeed ruthless. To stop me, you actually used your final trump card. Ma Wanya looked at Dan Yuanzi with hatred through the small world. Humph! If your heavy cauldron sect did not collude with Ganwuji, how could I gamble on this path of no return? Since you want to betray your ancestors for glory, then don't blame us for not remembering our old friendship. Young Master Yi, our two sects no longer have the Emperor-destroying arrow. Destroying the heavy cauldron sect is right before us, Dan Yuanzi said with cupped fists. Yi Fei's eyes lit up. Suddenly, he turned his head and shouted, Tyrannosaurus King, bring your elites and charge forward with me. Humph! The one with the surname Yi looks honest, but he is actually full of evil tricks. You want me to take the lead? No way. The few of you charge forward together. The Tyrannosaurus King hid at the back. However, he gave the order to the Tyrannosaurus King, who was the biggest threat to his throne. That Tyrannosaurus King's face immediately turned green. However, he could not disobey the king's order. However, he could only go berserk with the mentality that he would die. Then, the quasi-emperor Tyrannosaurus King charged toward the heavy cauldron sect's mountain gate like a roaring mountain. Yi Fei only heard an earth-shattering sound. The berserk tyrannical dragon had already smashed a huge hole in the small world of the heavy cauldron sect. All the defensive arrays were like rags in front of the berserk tyrannical dragon, which was even bigger than a mountain. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. This scene scared the group of heavy cauldron sect's guests and the quasi-emperors who were still fighting the Tyrannosaurus King. Heavens! When these Tyrannosaurus Kings go berserk, they're so terrifying. I reckon that they can even smash a star into pieces. Quick run! Demon Yi is targeting Ganwuji and the heavy cauldron sect. It has nothing to do with us. We surrender. It's over. The heavy cauldron sect is completely finished. The one with the surname Ma. You are such a troublemaker. Why did you have to provoke Demon Yi? Countless elders and guests of the heavy cauldron sect cursed in fear. When Ma Wangye saw the defensive formations that the heavy cauldron sect had painstakingly built being easily destroyed by the Tyrannosaurus King, he was so angry that tears fell from his eyes. After all, the heavy cauldron sect was his foundation. Now, his foundation was about to be destroyed by the Tyrannosaurus King. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.